Hallo, hallo? Okay. Das ist Nummer 3. Okay. Muss man mal neu. Ich schreibe.
Ich will manchmal bringen Handynummer.
Nou, niks gedaan.
Ja, genau. Also unten ist ein Ausdruck frei, aber da haben wir diesen Dauerton gehabt quasi.
Aus 2 gezählt. Mit 2 ist jetzt nicht mein zweites Mikrofon.
So. Ja. Und oben die schwarzen Dinger, da sind die Mikros drin. Die 2 schwarzen.
Ja. Es sind 4 Mikros im Ganzen.
Ja, ist doch die Summe. Ich weiß halt nicht. Hätte ich jetzt auch gedacht, da hatte ich das drin. Und dann haben wir diesen Standardton.
wird halt eingestellt wird.
Ja, ja, genau, aber da müsste man halt irgendwie einstellen, dass Audio aus, aber es rauskommt. Das heißt, irgendwie.
Mach's lieber so.
Oh, wäre gar kein. Oder? Geht auch noch aus.
Ich habe alle drei an. Moment. Hier ist Nummer 3. Das ist Nummer 4. 3 ist für tot. Hallo, hallo? Hallo, hallo? Okay, das habe ich.
Ich habe das Kabel stecken lassen.
Hallo? Wie haben wir jetzt noch gefühlt? Sorry, das ist ein bisschen stressig. Moment. Ja, den Dingens, den Nasser will am Moment lebt, also als ein YouTube-Channel sieht ihr gut nicht, das Bild von der Berg. Was hat er da gerne von mir? Also das war mit der Stadt Albert. Einzelfall. Ja.
Hallo, 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 Test, 1, 2, 3. Ich habe heute Morgen einen Toast gegessen und mit Nutella drauf und ein Kiri-Toast.
Perfekt. Jetzt mal ein anderes noch.
Das ist ein Bett verbunden.
Hallo, hallo, hallo. Test. Der Kaffee heute Morgen im Hotel hat nicht gut geschmeckt. Hörst du mich? Ist aber auch ein bisschen leiser.
In das Confidentialität als Publik. Das verstehe ich. Eine Sekunde. Ich gehe dann Paramètre aktivieren. Autorisé. So. Voilà. Okay, forme. Une seconde. Enregistrer les modifications. Dann embed l'intégration. Option de distribution en zone. Ja, okay. Alles tipptopp? Ja, alle. Die. So. So. Ich muss mir was zu trinken holen und mich installieren. Ja, weil der Ton, der fängt jetzt an. 10 vor. Kommt ihr da rein? Oder? Ohne die Mikros zu stellen? Du brauchst ganz viel anhalten.
Ich bleibe hier stehen, 3 Stunden.
No? It can't? It doesn't work.
Okay, let's go. Nothing other than different else you can do than having a nice meeting together. Yeah. I hope that you just
Okay. I would say let's get started. Wir sind ganz froh, dass ihr da seid. We're really pleased to have you here. As I said, we'll do this event in English. If you want to ask questions in French, in Luxembourgish, feel free, no problem. If there's something you
Hello,
don't
everybody.
understand.
Good morning.
Bonjour.
So, don't worry, we don't need to listen to the introduction. So there's
It's just about time we get started.
Christophe will confirm that. There's first of all there's a statement from the chairman, chairwoman of this commission. So that's not, I would say, not the most important part of the hearing. Again, welcome here in the House of the European Union.
So first of all, let me welcome you.
Ganz kurz, ja.
Bienvenue.
Ja, dan maakt Lou doen. Okay. That's, by the way, that's Marc Angel.
Nous sommes
He's
aujourd'hui
doing the
réunis
camera
pour
and
auditionner le candidat
bringing
commissaire,
light.
Monsieur
So,
Schmidt,
exactly.
notre
As I
cher
said,
collègue.
for you not falling asleep, in half an hour latest you'll have the coffee. That's
Je suis
promised.
certain que nous allons coopérer avec lui de façon excellente,
And
mais il faut d'abord
again,
confirmer
thank you
sa
very much
nomination.
for being here.
Et cette
Why
coopération
thank you?
débute
Because
aujourd'hui à l'occasion de cette audition.
I promise you that we will do everything everything we can to make this event exciting, which is a bit of a challenge for a hearing. I know that. So I really appreciate your effort coming here in the early morning in the House of the European Union. That's great, and I especially appreciate the effort of our member of the European Parliament, Christophe Hansen from the CSV and of the political group of the European People's Party, who yesterday evening was part of the hearing of Phil Hogan. That's the Irish candidate for the European Commission. He asked him a question. We'll talk about that in a minute. And he's now here with us to share his experience. And we'll have to ride back to Brussels at 10. So he got up very early this morning just for you. So I think that's a great effort. So welcome, Christophe Hansen.
En fin d'audition, il disposera également de 5 minutes pour les remarques finales.
The second person I'd like to introduce is Marc Angel. Marc Angel is right now, I would say, still. We'll see how Nicolas Schmit goes because there's a link. We'll talk about that in a minute. He's, let's say, still member of the Luxembourgish Parliament, and more importantly, as a member of the Luxembourgish Parliament, he is president of the Commission for International and European Affairs. And as I said, there's a link. Well, if Nicola Schmit does well, if the European Parliament is happy with the performance of Nicola Schmit, it will be Marc Angel who will be succeeding him to the European Parliament, because Nicola Schmit is still member of the European Parliament. So warm welcome to Marc Angel. Merci, dass du da warst. And last but not least, we have Professor Robert Harmsen here, and I know a lot of you know him because he made this, as far as I understood, he made this session mandatory for you today, this morning. Don't blame only him, also blame us. So as I said, I hope it's not going to be too bad, and I hope it's going to be interesting. So for those who don't know him, and I know that we also have pupils from the Lünster Lycée. Wen ist vom Lünster Lycée? Also Schüler ganz motiviert Schüler vom Lünster Lycée. And we have pupils from the Viertchen. Wow, okay. What did I want to say? Well, yes, he leads the Master of European Governance at the University of Luxembourg. So in case you're interested in politics, in case you are interested in the history of the European integration, Europe, and want, interested in really know in depth how the European Union works, well, that's the guy to talk to, and that's the guy to be in touch with if you want to study at the University of Luxembourg. So warm welcome to Robert Harmsen. And as you see, and as I don't always see, we have this hearing going on at the back of me. So if you see something happening right now and I'm talking, and our experts are talking, feel free to interrupt and say, by the way, there might be something interesting going on here. But this said, there's a high chance that there will be very, very technical questions. I think Christophe can confirm that from the yesterday's hearing. And if I may say so, there are some questions that are more interesting, more relevant than others, and we will be free to interrupt. You should be really free to ask questions all the time. So if there's something you don't understand, which is not clear of what our experts say, of what Nicola say, or of what the MEPs say, feel free to also ask us. That's what's not me. To be honest, I'm trying to be your voice. I think I know as little as you know about things going on here, and I'm very happy to have these three people. And there is Nicolas Schmit starting, and I'm shutting up. Okay, let's listen to Nicolas Schmit, and we'll talk later.
Cette audition devant vous. Je conçois la mission qui me sera confiée, si le Parlement la confirme, qu'au travers un travail commun avec vous. Mon parcours politique et professionnel témoigne de mon engagement en faveur du projet européen. J'ai eu le privilège de participer à un certain nombre d'étapes importantes de sa construction. Cette œuvre collective a permis à l'Europe de renaître de ses cendres et d'assurer aux générations successives de connaître la paix, la liberté et la prospérité. Cette Europe est d'abord fondée sur des valeurs et droits fondamentaux qu'il s'agit de défendre et de mettre en œuvre dans notre action de tous les jours. Nous sommes déterminés, comme nous y indique le préambule du traité, à promouvoir le progrès économique et social des peuples. C'est le sens de l'économie sociale de marché hautement compétitive consacrée par l'article 3 et à laquelle la présidente élue a fait clairement référence. La force du modèle européen est de concilier l'économique et le social et d'y associer désormais pleinement la dimension environnementale. Je fais mienne cette déclaration de Jacques Delors de 2016 quand il dit « Si l'élaboration des politiques européennes compromet la cohésion et sacrifie des normes sociales, ce projet européen n'a aucune chance de recueillir le soutien des citoyens européens. » Et nous avons aujourd'hui, plus que jamais, besoin de gagner ce soutien et la confiance des citoyens. Le renforcement de la dimension sociale qui concrétise une Europe qui protège et est au service de ses citoyens en est un élément essentiel. Je m'engage solennellement devant vous à m'atteler à cette tâche dans l'écoute, la concertation et le dialogue. Permettez-moi de passer maintenant à l'anglais.
Si je suis confirmé au poste de commissaire, je me fixerai deux objectifs. D'abord, renforcer l'emploi, avoir une main-d'œuvre qualifiée, prête à affronter les transitions technologiques et climatiques, et puis à côté de l'emploi.
Social rights for all and social inclusion. I will pursue high standards on the European labour market, as we need to achieve upward convergence in our living and working conditions. I will promote a European labour market that guarantees access and good opportunities for everybody, and in particularly for persons with disabilities, migrants, Roma communities, and the most deprived. I will do my utmost to fight poverty, to break the poverty cycle affecting children, and to improve the support to youth. I will work to promote a fairer Europe. In a sustainable economy, social rights have a central place. Together with Executive Vice President designate Valdis Dombrovskis, I will ensure the mainstreaming and strengthening the social dimension based on the European Pillar of Social Rights. I will closely and regularly, with the European Parliament, the Member States, social partners, and all stakeholders to pursue a fairer, more social and inclusive Europe. The European Pillar of Social Rights is a joint political commitment of the three institutions. In close cooperation with Parliament, I will develop an action plan to implement the pillar, both at the Union level and in each Member State, building on the achievements made under the Commission of President Juncker and on the political guidelines of President-elect von der Leyen. 241 million people are currently in employment in the EU, a record high. The unemployment rate in the EU continues to decline, although not in all member states and not in all regions. Not everybody benefits from this positive development. We must ensure that work pays and that it provides a decent living. I will put forward a legal instrument to ensure that every worker in our union has a fair minimum wage. It is not about setting one single EU wage level, and I will pay particular attention to social models of different member states. Jointly, we need to act on equality of opportunity. We need to ensure that men and women feel confident about their future, the future of their families, and the future of their children. To address these challenges, I will reinforce the Youth Guarantee and will lead the work to develop a European Child Guarantee. Gender balance and gender equality are central to my vision on jobs and social rights. I will closely with the new Commission for Equality to close the gender pay and pension gap, propose binding pay transparency measures, and fully implement the Work-Life Balance Directive for the benefit of both women and men. Many of our citizens are preoccupied by the deepening inequalities. Adequate social protection and pension systems, an inclusive labour market with fair wages, and supporting active ageing, career transitions, and investing in social services will be important to fight poverty and to ensure social inclusion. Here, the social economy can play an important role, particularly in local communities, by generating social return. One of the areas I personally care much about is health and safety at work. It is not acceptable that in 2019, people in Europe are still at risk at their workplace. I will promote the adoption of further measures against carcinogens in the workplace. The changing world of work requires new reflections on occupational health and safety. Commissioner for Jobs also means Commissioner for Free Movement of Workers. This is not only a fundamental part of the internal market, but it is also considered by EU citizens as one of the EU's most important achievements. However, recent years have shown us that labour mobility also bears a number of challenges, be it social dumping or brain drain. But we should indeed resist and attempt to limit the opportunity for EU citizens to move freely within the EU. We should rather tackle the underlying issues. Here, the newly created European Labour Authority can play an important role, ensuring cooperation between national authorities, namely carrying out joint inspections. From the discussion in this committee last week, I know that the practical setup of the European Labour Authority is an important issue for many of you. I assure you that it will be rapidly put into place and provided with the adequate means to fulfill its tasks. The Union is challenged in a globalized world by big transformations, economic, technological, environmental, and demographic. People need to be accompanied in the upcoming transitions, enabling them to keep their skills updated as the economy evolves. This requires investment as well as a coherent skills policy with improved tools to accompany all career transitions at all ages. I will explore the idea of individual learning accounts for people of working age. Our labour markets will be changing due to automation, digitalization, and artificial intelligence. We have to engage decisively to mitigate the risks, shape the transitions, and seize the opportunities. It is crucial to ensure trust in the digital future. Therefore, we need to address the labour conditions of platform workers and actively address new forms of precariousness. We all remember the financial crisis and the effects it had on citizens and businesses. We need to be ready to meet future downturns and ensure that the Union is prepared to react in a socially responsible manner to future shocks. The resilience of the economic and monetary union depends on stabilization functions. A future European unemployment benefit reinsurance scheme requires a careful design to ensure rapid responses to shocks while preserving adequate unemployment protection. Social and environmental sustainability are two faces of the same coin. Decent work, quality education, reduced poverty and inequality need to be at the center of a European semester that is refocused on the Sustainable Development Goals. Our international actions need to support a decent work agenda for all. I will work with my colleagues to ensure that international labour standards are put at the core of our trade agreements and in our multilateral work. Investment in people needs to be recognised as an investment in a better future. The European Social Fund Plus is the Union's prime fort. We have to ensure nobody, no region, no country is left behind. To achieve this objective, the ESF Plus, the European Globalisation Adjustment Fund, InvestEU and the new Just Transition Fund need to be robust enough. A strong social Europe needs social legislation, which is up to date, properly implemented and enforced. It requires social to remain at the core of economic policy coordination under the European semester, a more efficient and simpler use of the European funds, and a permanent and constructive dialogue with social partners and the civil society. Social dialogue should be promoted at all levels, as the Union's social dialogue can only work when built on strong, autonomous national social partners. Likewise, collective bargaining should also be supported, as it constitutes an important feature of our social market economy. As Commissioner, I will fully engage in a dialogue both with the European Parliament and the Council, but also with national parliaments and national social partners. This way we can develop balanced, effective and proportionate initiatives, which are in full respect of subsidiarity. More than ever, facts need to drive our discussion. My work will be based on thorough analysis and impact assessment of our initiatives, drawing on inspiration also beyond the European Union, from our partners in the G7 and the G20, and working with international organizations like the ILO and the OECD. Liebe Frau Präsidentin, sehr geehrte Kollegen! Die designierte Präsidentin hat uns eine klare Botschaft mit auf den Weg gegeben. Eine Union, die mehr erreichen will. Ich bin heute Morgen mit einem ehrgeizigen Programm zu Ihnen gekommen. Diese Liste ist aber nicht vollständig. Wir müssen uns in einer sich schnell und ständig verändernden Welt orientieren. Ich werde Ihre Sichtweisen, Ideen, Fragen und Einwände hören und versichere Ihnen, dass ich in den nächsten 5 Jahren sehr eng mit diesem Haus kooperieren werde. Wir müssen zusammenarbeiten, um das Vertrauen der Bürger, Arbeitnehmer, Familien und Unternehmen in die Europäische Union wieder zu stärken. Europa ist der beste Ort der Welt, um zu leben und zu arbeiten. Mein Ziel ist es, dazu beizutragen, dass das auch so bleibt. Zusammen haben wir die Kraft, unsere Zukunft zu gestalten. Danke für Ihre Aufmerksamkeit. Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much.
That was the declaration of Nicolas Schmit, and now the questions are coming, and we'll listen to the answer of the first question, but First of all, I want to ask Christophe Hansen a question, who had the honor of asking the first question yesterday to Phil Hogan, the Irish Commissioner. So first of all, you had the honor of asking the first question. Why is that?
Before I give the floor to coordinators
in the
for
first
the
round, it's the coordinators of the political groups that are allowed. So every political group has in each of and every committee one spokesperson. This is called the coordinator, and so the first round will be the spokesperson of every political group. So there are 7 speakers in the first round that had then the opportunity to ask the first questions. And maybe I could give you a little bit some details how this all is prepared, because we had already the opportunity to ask 5 questions in the name of the respective committee to the commissioner, and to these 5 questions the commissioner answered by writing as well. We got these answers last Friday, so the chair of the meeting was in the beginning then replying a little bit to that and saying, well, on this question maybe you did good, on the other question maybe you didn't go as far as we wanted to have it. So that's why the chair in the beginning made this introduction, and based on the feeling the commissioner designate got from the political groups, he is making his introductory statement, which is about 15 minutes. And how does he get the information, what the different political groups want? So, well, in my case, Phil Hogan, who we interviewed yesterday evening, he had meetings with all the political groups where they sat together for at least 1 hour, and there he got the feeling, what do they expect from me? I think that is very important, and that's as well, then he knows as well a little bit what will be now the oral questions that will be coming up. And in this format now, this is the coordinator of the EPP as well, and Mr. Radke, and he's then asking 1 question, then Nicola Schmit will have 2 minutes of reply, and then Mr. Radke can ask a follow-up question, and Mr. Schmidt has 1 minute more to reply. So this is the basic scheme, that every question is then with including the answers will be 5 minutes. And then there is as well the whole preparation for this. All the political groups meet still ahead of the meeting.
Perhaps we can listen to the, we haven't listened to the question, but maybe we can listen to the answer.
Sozialpartnerschaft und soziale Marktwirtschaft basiert. Und ohne soziale Partnerschaft, ohne starke Sozialpartner, natürlich alle hieß das mal in einem großen Land, von dem Erfinder der sozialen Marktwirtschaft übrigens geprägt, zu schaffen. Die großen Umwälzungen haben mit sich gebracht, dass in allen Ländern sowohl die Gewerkschaften wie auch die Unternehmerverbände ganz oft geschwächt wurden. Und es ist natürlich sehr wichtig, dass wir in diesen ökonomischen Umwälzungen dafür sorgen, dass eigentlich auf beiden Seiten die Sozialpartner wieder gestärkt werden. Die Europäische Union, die Kommission hat Mittel, dies zu tun. Wir haben also bei diesem Institution Building eine Reihe von Möglichkeiten, auch finanzielle Möglichkeiten, und die müssen gezielt eingesetzt werden, besonders in den Ländern, wo eigentlich Sozialpartnerschaft ein relatives Fremdwort ist. Und deshalb müssen wir diese Mittel konzentriert einsetzen. Ich zähle und setze voll auf Sozialdialog. Und den Sozialpartnern muss bewusst werden, dass sie ein großes Interesse haben, eigentlich diesen Sozialdialog mitzugestalten. Dass es für jeden wichtig ist, diesen Sozialdialog zum Erfolg zu führen. Weil der Erfolg des einen ist ja oft auch der Erfolg des anderen. Europa ist ein unglaubliches Unternehmen für den positiven Kompromiss, den konstruktiven Kompromiss. Und eigentlich Sozialpartnerschaft lebt von Kompromissen. Aber dieser Kompromiss bringt uns weiter, hilft unserer Wirtschaft und bringt die Gesellschaft zusammen.
Mr. Radke, 1 minute for a follow-up question.
Sie haben ja angekündigt, dass wir auch demnächst über den Mindestlohn auf europäischer Ebene diskutieren werden. Für mich ist der Mindestlohn immer nur eine Hilfskrücke. Die Frage, was ist ein gerechter Lohn, was ist ein fairer Lohn, drückt sich am Ende immer nur in Tarifverträgen aus. Daher meine ganz konkrete Frage, was plant die Kommission, um Tarifbindung wieder attraktiver zu machen? Denn aktuell ist Tarifbindung rückläufig.
Mr. Schmidt.
Thank you. Ich habe mal einen Kollegen in der luxemburgischen Politik gehabt, der hat gesagt, der Mindestlohn ist eigentlich der Tarifvertrag, die keinen haben. Und deshalb ist natürlich der Mindestlohn ein wichtiger Bestandteil, weil wir eben feststellen, dass nicht in allen Ländern der Europäischen Union, aber in vielen Ländern eigentlich diese Tarifbindung sehr stark geschwächt wurde oder in einigen Ländern auch fast schon abwesend ist. Das hängt natürlich mit dem Sozialdialog zusammen. Wir müssen also zuerst die Sozialpartner stärken und wir müssen ihnen auch aufzeigen, dass eigentlich der Weg über Tarifvertrag der bessere Weg ist, weil er gibt also allen Rechten und er gibt auch diese Flexibilität, die wir ja auch mal in unserer Wirtschaft brauchen. Und wenn ein guter Sozialdialog in einem Unternehmen stattfindet, dann versteht der eine den anderen und der andere den einen. Und das müssen wir also fertigbringen. Wie können wir das machen? Das kann man nicht nur von oben herab dekretieren, dass von morgen ab jeder einen Tarifvertrag schließen kann. Aber wir müssen über Sozialdialog, über die Stärkung des Sozialdialogs
social dialogue. Before there were words of Nicola Schmit was speaking about the youth guarantee, the European Labour Authority, and ensure trust in the digital future. What all that is supposed to mean, we'll talk about also with Marc Angel in a later stage. So, but first of all, Christophe, coming back to you, you asked the first question yesterday to the designated Trade Commissioner, Phil Hogan. Trade is one of the most important assets of the European Union, also to bargain its strength. Geopolitical strength on the European level, if I may say. And your question was related to the United States. Perhaps you can tell us what question did you ask and why did you ask this particular question?
Well, of course, it was my first question and then the follow-up question. So the commissioner more or less knows what will be the first question, but he's not really prepared to the follow-up question. I think that you saw this.
So the questions are announced in.
They are not announced, but he knows from the meetings we had which will be the topics we will be addressing. So he knew that there will be something coming about the situation of concerning our relationship with the United States. And we had as well before meetings with the different political groups because we want to avoid that every political groups will be asking the same question because of course it is something the relation with the United States, Brexit, China, Mercosur, that those are topics that are really on the trade agenda very high. Every group is interested, but we want to avoid this. So that's why I had the opportunity as the first one to ask a question about our relationship with the United States. We know Donald Trump is going into a trade war with nearly everyone in this world. And so my question was, how would Commissioner Hogan establish a coherent collaboration and let's say working together with the United States, how he would then re-establish this stable relationship, and then the follow-up question.
Sorry, and if you were satisfied about this question, we will know it after having listened to Nicola Schmit for 2 further minutes. Sorry about that.
Also an invitation by the strategic agenda adopted by the European Council. And therefore, we will very rapidly, very fast work on this action plan, which means we have to translate the principles in actions, in concrete actions. That might be legislative actions, that might be just recommendations, that might be some ideas which member states have to translate because we have to respect the competences of member states and the competence of the Union, and very often these competences are shared. And so I think already in my mission letter, there are a few legislative actions which are clearly stated. The minimum wage is one. The child guarantee, I think we have to frame what we mean by a child guarantee. We have the youth guarantee. I think we have to revamp, promote the youth guarantee, because young people out of job, that's the worst thing for Europe and for the credibility of Europe. So we have to redefine and encourage and strengthen the youth guarantee. We have the platform workers. I think we have to reflect what will be the best way to implement social rights and good working conditions for the platform workers. So these are several ones which sometimes request legal actions, legal instruments, and the finance. We have to gear our European Social Fund to the implementation of the pillar. That's obvious, because that's what we want to implement. That's what we want to achieve.
Madam Yonkerius, follow-up question?
And
my
we're not going.
Question would also concentrate on the child guarantee, because I must say we highly appreciate the recent commitment of the Commission in this regard. So it's important that it's in their agenda. But my question would be, what kind of instrument and also what kind of funding does the European Commission foresee for this European child guarantee? And how will you convince the member states to support the EP proposal in the ESF Plus negotiations and to allocate fresh money instead of redeploying from allocations intended for other objectives of this fund?
1 minute for the answer.
Thank you. We all agree that child poverty is the worst thing. Child poverty is destroying the future of these persons, because being a poor child very often means that you will be a poor adult. It's terrible for the individual, but it is also terrible for society. Now, there are already now many instruments, many measures acting for improving the situations of poor children. We have to refocus these actions. We have to bring them together. We have to concentrate them first on those who need it most in our societies. And I say it's not just in poor societies where there are poor children. It's also in wealthy societies where we have poor children. So we have to have a good approach how we deal with it. And I could imagine, basing on the work which has been done in the Parliament, to have some kind of recommendation. The money, important. Well, I have understood
if
that
I
you
may,
cannot
I would
have an ambitious
get back
policy,
to Christophe
good
Hansen.
for everybody without funding. So I have
My
noticed
colleague
what
Tobias will,
European Parliament
in the
said,
meantime,
and I
distribute
think this
a
is an
document
interesting
about.
way, and I
We
will
have it in
certainly
French,
bring that into
the
discussion,
pillar of social
including with
rights
the
of the
Council.
European
Mr.
Union,
Pislaru, your
because it's an
question, 1
important
minute.
topic of the hearing of Nicolas Schmit. What this is about, there are 20 principles in there. We'll talk about it later. But coming back to your hearing, I mean, the questions you asked to the hearing to Phil Hogan yesterday, it was about the trade relations with the United States. How satisfied were you with the answer? And then you asked the second question, because as we saw, you can ask one question where you have how many? 2 minutes, right? One, and then for the rehash question, for the following question, again 1 minute. Is that correct? Okay. So, how satisfied were you?
Well, I was satisfied with his first answer, but of course I wanted to know more. So we know that this famous Airbus case is pending, and there will be a ruling by the WTO today.
Sorry, the Airbus case is?
The Airbus case is that the European Union and several member states granted illegal subsidies to Airbus. The United States did the same to Boeing, but their ruling will only fall at the beginning of next year. So there is a retaliation list for tariffs on European products, and he is targeting. Donald Trump is targeting mainly European products from the countries where Airbus parts are produced. So there will be, but his products, the products on this list are namely products from the agriculture sector. So I had two follow-up questions actually. The one is, how will he guarantee that Trump will not achieve to break the unity amongst the member states with this retaliation list? And the second question was, how will he be able to protect the agricultural sector? And to that question, to the agricultural sector, he wasn't very clear, but that's as well the problem, because I think you heard a little bit the tapping. That's the chair who then exactly is timing the thing. And now Nicolas Schmit got it in the first answer where he had 2 minutes. We already heard it, so he was already over the 2 minutes. And at the second one too, because of course you have so many things to say, and 2 minutes for the first reply and 1 minute for the second one is really short. I can tell you, when you are in plenary, you speak for 1 minute, it's more or less 120 words. If you have to answer to such tricky questions in 120 words, I can tell you it's definitely tricky.
What I wonder, this follow-up question that you asked, you prepared it in advance, or did you just come up with the question after you heard the answer of Phil Hogan?
The follow-up, the first question was prepared.
Obviously,
because it was on the topic where we really agreed among the different political groups. The follow-up question was spontaneous, and that's of course for me then a challenge to take this question from 2 minutes of an answer from the commissioner. And it is as well challenging for him because, well, he isn't prepared at all to such questions.
So that means you said it was agreed in the political group. So I'm wrong imagining Christophe Hansen in his MEP office thinking on his own what question he could ask to a candidate. So you propose maybe something to your political group, and you say, well, that's the question I would like to ask, and then you get an approval, or how does that work?
Well, in my political groups, in the committee yesterday, we have 20 members. So, of course, and then we got, just because it's 25 questions for all the political groups, so we can't get all the questions, of course. So there is an agreement between the political groups, which group gets how many questions. So for my group, we had 6 questions out of the 25. And then we had made a call for interest inside our political group. 17 out of 20 wanted to speak, so it was then, and they give as well written input to what they wanted to ask for the oral questions. So it was my duty to bring all the ideas of my colleagues together and bring this into 6 blocks, because we just had 6 spots. And then I had to make a decision who is going to ask the question. And that is my role as a coordinator, then to give these 6 slots to the 6 members of my political group. But of course, I told you 17 were asking for speaking time. You make more members unhappy than you make members happy.
And perhaps before turning back to Nicolas Schmit, it would be worth having a look at the procedure. So Tobias is just distributing this the seat projection or repetition of the European Parliament, and as you can see, the political group of Christophe Hansen, the European People's Party, is the biggest one, and then followed by the political group of Nicola Schmit and Marc Angel, the Social Democrats, are the second biggest. Why am I saying this? Is because Christophe was just explaining that according to the strength of the group, you get a certain number of questions. So now, first of all, every group gets a first question. So we started off with a member MEP from the European People's Party, Mr. Radke, then another lady from the Netherlands, from the Jongerius, whose name thank you, Christophe, from the Social Democrats. The third question was from Renew Europe, and this question is now from the Liberals. And now this question that we will be listening to, it's from this person you are not, you don't have any attachments to. You're not.
No, she's not a relative of me, and she's not my wife. So
it's a Danish colleague from the Green Party, and we will listen to her question now.
I Danmark, der ved vi, at et højt niveau af social sikkerhed, det gør også danskere i stand til at omstille os hurtigt og uddanne sig gennem hele livet. Jeg vil derfor spørge dig, om du vil foreslå lovgivning om minimumsindkomst.
Un revenu minimum qu'il ne faut pas confondre avec le salaire minimum.
Okay. Request for English, Marco.
Comparer à notre système de normes pour garantir que le.
Make sure that European workers are more flexible and can adapt without being afraid of falling into poverty. Thank you.
The answer, 2 minutes.
Well, first I would say that what you have said in the beginning is absolutely shared. And when you read the political guidelines by the president-elect, that's very clearly stated that we want in Europe a society of well-being, of social justice, of fairness, and this is something we have to strive for, because our historical experience shows us that when this is not anymore guaranteed, even Europeans might become crazy. So I think this is an essential part politically crazy. This is an essential part of our European way of life, of our European social model. Now, about the revenue, a minimum revenue. We have in most of our countries, I think in nearly every country, a member state, we have some kind of a minimum revenue. But they are very different, very low in some, higher in others. And you might say, well, that's subsidiarity. No, there is some common thing, some common interest in having a guarantee for every citizen, European citizen, to be able to live decently, even if this person cannot be tomorrow on the labor market and can make a living of his or her own. And therefore, we have to look after some kind of criteria of benchmarks to permit people to live decently. This means, like the minimum wage, it cannot be the minimum revenue the same in Luxembourg and the same in Bulgaria or somewhere else. But it has to take into account the overall living standard and the situation, the economic, financial, budgetary situation. But it has also to guarantee to each European citizen, wherever he or she lives, a decent living. And that's we have to work on. If it should be what instrument is appropriate, that we have to study, because this has to be done in discussion, in dialogue with the member states, and especially also with all the organizations who are dealing with poverty and inclusion.
Was talking about.
I want to listen to what they have to tell me.
Follow-up question.
We are not listening to the follow-up question. We'll get back to the hearing when the questions will be asked from MEP of the ID group. The ID group is a group of nationalist MEPs, where the German AfD is sitting, for example, and I'm pretty curious to know what kind of question they will ask. But first of all, the question, Christophe, you were explaining you are part of the steering committee for your political group for the hearing of designated Trade Commissioner Phil Hogan. So how do you guys decide if he made it or not, or if he will pass as a commissioner?
Well, we had, of course, inside our political group, immediately after the hearing of Phil Hogan yesterday evening at around 9 o'clock in the evening, we had then our meeting with the members of my political group saying, well, we will give support. We decided internally into the group that we will give support to him. And then afterwards, we had a meeting with the coordinators and the chair of the...
That was all yesterday evening?
That was all yesterday.
At what time did you go to bed, if I may ask?
1 o'clock.
But I have to add, we have to consult.
Did Phil Hogan go to bed knowing that he passed or not? Will you communicate? When will he know?
He will know by tonight, because, well, the thing was, after the meeting, we met then with the coordinators. That's, I told you, the spokesperson of every political group. So I was representing my group, and there were from the 6 other groups, the other coordinators with the chair. Then we decided about 3 options. There were 3 options on the table. One is to reject the candidate.
Sorry for interrupting. Let's have a look what the ID question is. That is the party of Marine Le
based on
Pen.
overconsumption and endless growth is one of those traps, and that's what it's based on. The austerity policy in Europe has an impact on our pensions. The
travail s'impose au détriment de nos demandeurs d'emploi, et cette politique européenne dérive vers l'esclavagisme, tant à la suppression des droits minimums des travailleurs et à la dignité. Elle instaure un véritable dumping social qui s'organise notamment autour du travail détaché. Ma question, c'est de savoir quand est-ce que vous allez laisser l'économie servir les hommes et non le contraire. Ma question, c'est de savoir quand l'UE se mettra au service des peuples et non le contraire.
La présidente élue a clairement fixé un cap. Et le cap, c'est de mettre non seulement l'Union, mais aussi l'économie au service des hommes et des femmes. Et tout ce qui est dans le programme présenté par la présidente et tout ce qui est dans les grandes lignes que je viens d'exposer a un objectif. C'est de renforcer la protection sociale, l'état de protection sociale en Europe. C'est de renforcer de réactiver le progrès social, en l'adaptant aussi à une économie qui change, à un environnement économique qui change, notamment la globalisation. Mais nous ne devons pas être naïfs dans cette globalisation. C'est pour ça aussi que nous devons apporter nos idées, nos concepts dans la gestion de cette globalisation.
And
sur le dumping social,
sorry
je crois
about that.
que
we'll interrupt
l'actuelle commission
Nicola,
a fait
and get back to
des
it
propositions
in a minute. I want to
extrêmement
ask before
importantes
getting back to Christophe's
sur
response on
notamment
the
le détachement.
I want to ask Robert, because I heard you smiling, laughing together with Mark when we were hearing this question from the representative of the nationalist group. Is that a kind of question one can expect from an MEP from the ID group?
Yeah, I think it is the kind of question. I mean, essentially part of what's going on here is a kind of political posturing or political grandstanding in some cases, which is, say, if you look at these hearings, part of it is about a sort of genuine and detailed accountability, that they're asking about policies and directions. Part of it, and particularly as you move towards the more extreme bits of the political spectrum, is simply about making a political point. You've got a theater, you've got a stage, and this is an opportunity in this case to ask a question to which there is no conceivable answer in 2 minutes, but you're simply indicating your own direction, or you're indicating the sorts of things by which you're contesting a kind of mainstream consensus.
And now I'll get back to Christophe. You said there are 3 options after the after a hearing of a commissioner designate. Which are they?
Well, we had, as I said, 3 options. The first one was to reject the commissioner immediately, but for that you need unanimity amongst the coordinators. That would be the first question. We discussed that in the first place, and that has been ruled out because no one showed hands that he want to eliminate this commissioner immediately. Then the second option would be to go for a second hearing if you are not satisfied with the replies. That one has been ruled out too. So the third option is to give a letter of approval, but in this letter of approval you still can put clear questions inside, questions and let's say requests to the commissioner. And we decided yesterday in unanimity to give approval to Phil Hogan. It is not official yet.
So
the letter is sent.
Sorry, in unanimity means that all the group coordinators agree.
Yesterday they all.
So also the far left, also the far right, everyone was on the same page.
Not in the beginning, but when we discussed about this letter of approval, of course, everyone wanted to have his request inside of this letter of approval. So finally, everyone contributed with ideas to this letter of approval. If they contribute to the letter, they sign the letter.
Every political group, even nationalists, even every political group you're saying, and I mean in this example, was constructive at the end of the day.
At the end of the day, but I'm not sure if everyone got the procedure right. That's the other thing. That was the funny thing about it, because I was talking, of course, in trade matters, there are 3 political groups that are more trade reluctant, let's put it like that. It's the Greens, it's the GUE, the
far left, yes.
Far left, and the far right that are in principle more trade reluctant. And I was talking to the guy from the coordinator who is from AFP, by the way, and he said that he had a mandate that he would like to go for a second hearing. But when he saw that we already had the 2/3 majority for this letter of approval, they joined in afterwards with their statements that they wanted clear provisions on agriculture, for example, which is something we can of course accept.
Which is acceptable for you, yeah.
So they will sign the letter, but the letter is not finalized. That will be in a meeting tonight, because this letter will have to be sent to the Conference of Presidents.
So the Conference of Presidents are the presidents of the political group plus the president of the European Parliament. Is that correct?
Exactly, yes. And they will then receive this letter and approve it, and then it is done. So this letter, we will finalize the drafting tonight at around 6 o'clock, and then this letter.
Do you have a secretary? You have someone doing that for you, or will you have to sit behind your desk writing it?
We gave yesterday evening already our input to this letter, so now the secretariat of the committee will be elaborating a draft built on that, and then we will now discuss and compromise on the different points of that letter of approval, but it will be an approval in that case.
Okay, Christophe, you have, if I have a look at the watch, 7 minutes left to share with us. You said you have to drive back to Brussels. What is happening today? I mean, are you involved in another hearing? What's your share your agenda with us?
Yeah, I will be involved this afternoon in another hearing, and that will be a more tricky one than the one Nicola is facing now, because Nicola has the chance to be clear, for example, on his financial aspects, because a lot of the commissioners are not so clean as they should be. And as you already heard, there are 2 commissioners that are already off the board.
That have been rejected. The commissioner from, or the candidates from
Romania, from the Social Democrats, and from the EPP from Hungary. Of the Social Democrats, it was clear because she was involved in a corruption case. She was condemned in that case, so that was the clear reason why she was ruled out. On the Hungarian one, it was more of a political statement, because he's, of course, from the former member of the government of Viktor Orban, and that was mainly the reason for that. This afternoon, well, maybe I will have a question that is less topic related to agriculture, but which will be related to the financial interests of Mr. Wojciechowski, who will be interviewed this afternoon, because he's
a candidate
from PiS, from Poland. Exactly, yeah. From the ECR group, from the Conservatives, and he didn't have such a clear record on his financial interests. Firstly, because already in 2016, when he stood to be a member of the Court of Auditors, he got rejected by the European Parliament, but the Parliament is just asked for an opinion. We are not in co-decision on that, so he got rejected by Parliament because of his financial interest. He had 2 law firms in Poland. He just declared one of them. Then he had problems with his travel expenses, where he got too much money and he didn't give it back. So there was a lot of things of that. Now he says, well, I gave all my money back, so I'm clear. But for me, it's when I steal your mobile and then the police comes to me and I give it back to you, am I a criminal or not? I let you decide about that. Firstly, and secondly, he said that he gave the money back on a voluntary base, that it was his own initiative, but I have proof that he has been forced by the financial services of the European Parliament. He even he went back to the quaestors of the European Parliament to come back to that decision. So he was clearly aware. Clearly, a quaestor is in principle, we have 5 quaestors in the European Parliament. They are member of the Bureau, and they are in fact in charge to deal with conflicts between the members of the European Parliament and the different administrations. And of course, the financial administration is the one that is mostly concerned about that.
Christophe, thank you for your time. Thank you for being
with
us.
You're welcome.
Finally, our catering arrived. So for your ride back, you can take a pain au chocolat or a croissant. I think that's very important, or a coffee. Thank you for your insights. I think that was really valuable for us. And we'll continue the discussion with Marc and Robert. And before doing that, we'll continue listening a little bit to the hearing of Nicolas Schmit. Thank you very much, Christophe.
Que ceci n'est pas une compétence exclusivement européenne, je vous le concède. En Pologne, nous pensons qu'une cellule familiale forte signifie une Pologne forte. Pouvez-vous dire la même chose de l'Europe?
Well, we all agree that
nous sommes toutes et tous d'accord pour dire que la famille est la base de notre société. Personne n'a jamais remis ceci en question. Moi, je vous parlerai plutôt de pauvreté des enfants. Je vous parlerai d'équilibre vie professionnelle, vie privée. Je vous parlerai de lutter contre la pauvreté. Je vais vous parler de budget. Je vais vous parler de renforcer, d'aider, de soutenir les familles. La pauvreté des enfants, c'est la pauvreté de la famille qui est en arrière-plan. Les enfants pauvres vivent dans des familles pauvres. Ce sont souvent des enfants pauvres qui aident des familles pauvres. Donc, on ne peut pas dire que l'Union européenne n'aide pas les familles. Notre modèle social, précisément, aide à renforcer les familles en donnant à celle-ci de bonnes opportunités socio-économiques, qu'il essaie de donner l'occasion aux enfants de se scolariser, de disposer de soins de santé de bonne qualité et de disposer des mêmes opportunités, des mêmes chances dans la vie. Ceci fait partie d'une politique familiale active que l'Union européenne a toujours soutenue. Mais je suis d'accord avec vous, les politiques familiales sont surtout du ressort national. Cependant, ceci étant dit, elles doivent respecter des règles fondamentales, des lignes directrices, notamment en matière de non-discrimination.
Ces questions de suivi devraient être liées à la question principale, ne l'oubliez pas. Monsieur Willemsen.
Thank you, Chair. I will be speaking in Danish.
Je vais m'exprimer en danois.
Herr Schmidt.
Monsieur le candidat commissaire, dans vos réponses écrites au Parlement européen, vous dites que l'initiative européenne sur le salaire minimum doit être respectée. Mais il doit aussi respecter les compétences des États membres et des partenaires sociaux. En d'autres termes, la tradition nationale des conventions collectives. Est-ce que vous pouvez nous garantir qu'un salaire minimum au niveau européen va respecter les modèles nationaux du travail qui n'ont pas de salaire minimum qui sont prévus par la loi et qui déterminent la formation des salaires par le truchement de négociations collectives, comme c'est le cas dans le modèle nordique ou scandinave? Est-ce que vous pouvez, si ce n'est pas le cas, nous dire exactement ce que vous voulez obtenir? Merci.
Oui. Nous venons d'évoquer l'importance capitale des conventions collectives et de comment nous devrions revoir, aider, renforcer ces conventions collectives un peu partout en Europe. Bon, après avoir dit cela, après avoir partagé avec vous ce point de vue, comment pourrais-je affaiblir un système se fondant sur les conventions collectives et qui a prouvé son efficacité pour avoir de bons salaires et un monde du travail juste? Voilà, donc ce cadre de salaire minimum ne mettra aucunement, je dis bien aucunement, en cause le système reposant sur les conventions collectives qui permettent de bons salaires là où elles sont pratiquées. Et nous ne forcerons en aucun cas ces pays à changer leur tradition bien établie, bien enracinée. Et nous n'avons pas d'ailleurs l'intention non plus de fixer un salaire minimum européen. Comment est-ce que cela serait possible? Ce que nous voulons faire, c'est mettre en place un cadre, surtout dans les pays où ce système de convention collective n'existe pas, afin que l'on mette en place des salaires minimums de façon transparente et prévisible. Et voilà le cadre que nous devons mettre en place. Mais sans pour autant toucher aux traditions, aux cultures de conventions collectives qui ont permis de mettre en place, par exemple, des salaires minimums. Pour moi, il n'y a donc pas le moindre risque lié à ce système qu'il faut absolument protéger. Et j'encouragerai le plus grand nombre possible de pays à le copier, mais ce ne sera pas facile. Monsieur Willemsen.
Tak, Herr Schmidt.
Merci, Monsieur Schmidt. Ma question complémentaire sera la suivante. Est-ce que vous êtes d'accord pour dire qu'une proposition de loi sur un salaire minimum doit reprendre dès lors une dérogation pour les États membres qui ont déjà un niveau d'organisation supérieur et où la majorité se fait par le truchement de conventions collectives, donc avoir une dérogation écrite dans une proposition de loi?
If you want to call it... Si vous voulez appeler ça une exemption, appelez ça comme ça. Moi, j'ai été clair. Nous n'allons pas créer de perturbations, nous n'allons pas mettre ce système en danger en créant ce cadre commun pour un salaire minimum. Il faut protéger ce qui fonctionne. On ne touche pas à ce qui fonctionne. Voilà la garantie que je puis vous donner. Maintenant, deuxième cycle de questions. Nous sommes déjà 10 minutes en retard. Alors, ayez cela à l'esprit, soyez très précis, respectez vos minutes. On va commencer par Madame Hansen.
Je vais parler néerlandais. Merci, Madame la Présidente, merci, Monsieur le Commissaire. La numérisation et le développement de l'économie en plateforme a été évoqué il y a peu. Et nous savons que ceci présente des opportunités aussi bien pour les travailleurs que pour les indépendants. Parfait. Mais d'un autre côté, l'économie en plateforme présente aussi toute une série d'aspects négatifs. Notamment, on s'aperçoit que les contrats à court terme, les contrats atypiques, les contrats anormaux font florès. Alors, comment allez-vous garantir la protection des travailleurs, quelle que soit la nature du contrat auquel ils sont soumis? Est-ce que la directive détachement va être élargie aussi au travail en plateforme? Comment voulez-vous améliorer les conditions de travail dans ce secteur? Merci.
As I mentioned already,
comme je l'ai déjà dit, nous devons faire en sorte que les évolutions technologiques ne nous échappent pas. Et nous devons donner des garanties sociales et nous devons faire en sorte que ces garanties qui existent depuis longtemps ne soient pas détruites par ces nouvelles technologies. Aux États-Unis, en Californie, une loi a été adoptée pour les travailleurs des plateformes. C'est très intéressant parce que c'est dans ce pays, dans cette région, que l'économie de plateforme a été inventée et on s'est rendu compte dans ces régions qu'il y avait un fossé qui se creusait entre les technologies et leur application. Et nous devons, nous aussi, combler cette lacune. La Commission a déjà entamé des travaux à ce sujet avec la directive sur des conditions de travail prévisibles et transparentes, avec les recommandations sur la protection sociale qui parlent aussi des travailleurs indépendants. Nous devons faire en sorte que les droits de ces personnes soient renforcés et étendus. Les personnes qui travaillent pour des plateformes doivent avoir les mêmes droits sociaux que tous les autres travailleurs. Ces personnes devraient aussi avoir droit à avoir accès à des conventions collectives d'ailleurs. Donc nous devons faire en sorte que des travailleurs pour des plateformes qui sont des travailleurs indépendants ne soient pas en concurrence avec d'autres dans des conditions inéquitables. Nous devons avoir une approche globale concernant les conditions de travail et le volet social des travailleurs de plateforme. Je travaillerai avec Madame Vestager, avec la vice-présidente et avec le commissaire en charge de l'industrie. Ce que je proposerai sera de réunir une grande conférence assez rapidement avec les grands acteurs du domaine pour en discuter d'une bonne protection sociale pour les travailleurs du numérique. Madame Hansen.
Merci, Monsieur le Commissaire. Vous savez, je suis belge, comme vous l'entendez. Et vous savez que nous avons de grandes attentes vis-à-vis de votre travail. Nous souhaitons que vous poursuiviez l'excellent travail de votre excellente prédécesseur, Madame Thyssen. Donc, excusez-moi de cette question que je vous ai posée. Moi, je voudrais aussi vous parler des faux indépendants, parce que c'est lié à la première question, et c'est un dossier qui figure depuis tout un temps sur la table du Parlement européen. Quelle est votre approche des faux indépendants sans pour autant nuire aux droits des vrais indépendants?
Well, nobody wants to attack the...
Personne ne veut s'en prendre aux indépendants. Les personnes qui souhaitent travailler en tant qu'indépendants devraient pouvoir le faire. Il y a de nombreux jeunes qui veulent être indépendants. Nous ne voulons pas les empêcher de l'être. Mais ceci étant dit, les indépendants devraient avoir les mêmes droits à la protection sociale que d'autres travailleurs. Si nous ne garantissons pas un minimum de protection sociale, nous aurons d'énormes problèmes dans les 10, 20 ou 30 années à venir, voire tout de suite. Si ces personnes n'ont pas d'assurance maladie, que se passe-t-il si ces personnes sont malades? Si ces personnes ne sont pas assurées contre les accidents, enfin c'est des cas très concrets auxquels nous sommes confrontés avec les pseudo-indépendants de l'économie Uber. Qu'arrive-t-il à ces personnes lorsqu'elles ont un accident? Nous devons respecter les indépendants lorsque les indépendants sont de vrais indépendants. Si ce sont de pseudo-indépendants, eh bien, lorsque nous avons affaire à des personnes qui sont employées alors qu'elles sont censées être indépendantes, là, nous devons intervenir et corriger le tir.
Madame Wendt.
Madame Wendt, votre question, 1 minute.
Merci beaucoup. Je vais aussi, moi, vous parler danois. Merci, Monsieur Schmidt, d'être parmi nous devant vous. Je suis ici. La sécurité et les conditions de travail sont souvent une question de vie et de mort pour les travailleurs européens. Au sein du groupe socialiste, nous sommes déçus que dans votre lettre de mission, Madame von der Leyen n'ait pas repris des obligations pour améliorer le milieu de travail, l'environnement de travail. Au nom du groupe socialiste, c'est pourquoi je vous pose la question, Monsieur le candidat commissaire. La Commission va-t-elle développer une stratégie de la sécurité sur le lieu de travail d'ici la fin de votre mandat? Initialement, ça avait été le cas, mais il n'y a pas de vision.
With a European vision of zero fatal accidents at work and zero work-related cancer. And when will you present the promised fourth batch of proposals on harmful substances under the Carcinogens and Mutagens Directive? Thank you.
When you say that you want an economy which serves the people, I think one of the first elements of such an economy is to protect people at work. And it is absolutely a scandal that people who go to their workplace, they are exposed to health risk, they are exposed to major accidents, and some at the evening they cannot go home because they have died on their workplace. So for me, health and safety is an absolute priority. You have said this is not in my mandate. Yes, it is absolutely in my mandate. There is something on working conditions, by the way, linked to platform, but I read it as a more general invitation. But it's number 10 of the principles of the social pillar. And we have to work out an action plan and we have to implement the social pillar. And we have to, where needed, also to adopt legislative measures to implement the social pillar. So this will happen absolutely to health and safety. We have to, certainly I could not imagine that after the expiring of the framework, we just would say, well, this is not needed anymore. So I certainly will work on that and make proposals to the college. We have to work on new issues which are important in this field. You have mentioned a bunch of these directives linked to cancer and to other substances. I think there is good preparation work which has already been done so that we can table these directives quite rapidly and start the legislative process. We have to look at the new forms of health dangers like the more psychosocial and for that, I think social partners, they are discussing for the moment about digital economy, and they have included in the discussion on digital economy also these aspects of working conditions, because in this new digital economy, working conditions is a very important issue, but health and safety has forms of mental illness, for instance, which has to be tackled and looked after.
Follow-up question?
Mange tak, Mrs. Schmidt.
Thank you, Mr. Schmidt. I was very happy to hear that reply. According to the European Agency for Safety and Health at Work, every fourth worker is experiencing workplace-related stress. And they also say that there's a risk for serious losses in productivity due to musculoskeletal disorders. Unfortunately, both the Barroso and Juncker commissions refused to take action on this matter. If you become a commissioner, will you propose additional initiatives to improve the working environment in order to prevent occupational stress and repetitive stress injuries. Thank you.
Just mentioned the new economy, and these are elements also of the new economy. These are elements also in a period of big transformations in the companies, where people are really suffering from stress, even sometimes going to suicides. So this is something very serious, and this is something which engages not only the Commission, but it engages first the employees and the employers. And the employers have to be aware that these situations are bad, not only for their employees, but they are at the end bad for the whole company. So I think we have really to foster the awareness that we have to find the right solutions on the working environment linked to stress, to burnouts, to this musculoskeletal, I don't know, diseases. Now, it's not easy to come up with legislation. That's very difficult because some countries have tried, but no real good solution has been. This is a question of very practical approaches. It's a question of no size fits all, very adapted to all kinds of enterprises. But it has first to be a question of awareness. It's bad for everybody. It's bad for the worker, and it's certainly bad also for the company. Because when you have this mental illness, people are absent not for days, they are absent for weeks, sometimes for months, or they have difficulties to reintegrate anyway their job. So really we have to work on that with social partners, with the member states, and I'm optimistic that we can come to some positive results.
Madame Brunet, and
we will
questions?
continue this discussion here in the room by discussing this question that was just asked by this Danish MEP from the Social Democrat groups. And before, when this question was asked, Mark, you said, oh, listen, that's an important one. So why is this one important? Perhaps you can contextualize this question. And there's one aspect I was a bit surprised about. I mean, it's the same. She's from the same political group as you and Nicola Schmit. And this question was not a friendly fire question. It was rather critical. There's no. Is that normal that there's no solidarity in your group, or is that just the confrontation of institutions that's going on here?
No. I don't think the question was to tackle Mr. Schmidt. It was just to clarify something, I think. And it came out very clear in Mr. Schmidt's answer. She asked that she thought there was very little on work security and zero work accident, zero work cancer. All these issues were not stated enough in the mission letter the President-elect, Madame von der Leyen, sent to Mr. Schmidt. And then Mr. Schmidt answered, well, it's kind of hidden in it, but it's also very clearly in the social rights pillar. And he said it's pillar the point number 10. And he said, of course, my mission is to implement the pillar of social rights, and therefore these issues are very important. And he went on also, he answered to the follow-up question that it's not only work safety, physical accidents or physical diseases, but also all the mental stress. And he came back also to something he referred to before, in a changing world, in a transforming economy, in these transitions towards digital work and more artificial intelligence. These issues are quite important, and that's what I really like. And I think the social role is so important. And therefore also I think that Social Democrats in the future will have a future, because in all these transitions there is a social component dimension, and this is important.
Robert, I want to ask you before we will be listening again. We'll just we'll be listening again to the Nicola Schmidt's audience. There was a lot of mentioning about this mission that that Nicola Schmidt received from Ursula von der Leyen, and as Mark explained, there was some clarification needed about that. So if you go online and go on the webpage of this hearings procedure, you will see that every commissioner receives a mission statement from the President-elect of the Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, which starts with his first name, dear Nicola, blah, 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 and that's what I have to tell you, and that's what you got to do. I mean, I'm simplifying things. So my question is, what's the autonomy a commissioner really have, or is everything pre-designed from the president-elect and then the president of the European Commission?
There is a significant autonomy, though the directive role of the Commission President has increased over time. Because of difficulties in the past, increasingly now, of course, the Commission President is selected separately and first. There's a negotiation in terms then of choosing the Commission team. So there is now a much more affirmed role of the Commission President as having a sort of overall direction of the College of Commissioners. We've also seen with the last two commissions a recourse to executive vice presidents. There was one, Frans Timmermans, in the previous Juncker Commission. There are now three in the current Commission. Designated for broad areas around which the other commissioners are clustered. So Green New Deal, essentially digitalization and digital economy, and the area we're dealing with here, jobs and employment. So within that, there is kind of a balancing act between an overall direction from the Commission President and increasingly his coordinating vice presidents, but a scope or a margin as well within the brief. In that sense, it's not dissimilar in many respects to national governments. But I think that's also what we were seeing in terms of some of the questioning. I mean, I think the question from the Danish Social Democrat MEP was not meant particularly to be critical of Nicola Schmit, but I think to some extent it was meant to be critical of what might be perceived as the overall direction of the Commission or the Commission President. And of course, part of the position that we're seeing today, I mean, there are all sorts of games or enjeux, but part of it is here we have a Social Democrat Jobs Commissioner. So this is an opportunity for the Social Democrats on the committee to push, to have him affirm a certain agenda and affirm its place within the overall agenda of the Commission. And I think insofar as that question was intended to do, something was intended to do that. Here as a Social Democrat Jobs Commissioner, affirm the importance of this within the incoming Commission. And indeed, that's what he did.
Maybe you have noticed they talk about now jobs and social affairs. In the beginning it was just jobs, but it's like jobs and social affairs, because that was also a bit of a fear that the portfolio would have been cut. His predecessor was Mrs. Tyson, and that it would just be jobs, but it's like the broader social affairs, and you can see the questions go way also beyond of jobs. So that I think that's also important to notice. By the way, just one personal remark, I hate this word jobs. Maybe for English speakers it's a good word, but in other languages, no, I mean, when you are French or German or Luxembourgish, a job means like a summer job, a little job. And the other thing is an employment or a work, a proper work.
Labor more appropriate?
Yeah, I think employment, I would have said I want to be commissioner for employment. Jobs is, I don't know, maybe I have a problem. When I, as a politician talk, I rarely talk about jobs. I want people to have a good workplace or a good employment, but not a job. But maybe if you're English speakers, job is a good word. I don't know.
Just
Robert disagrees.
Just let me, as a native English speaker, I found it quite odd as well. I mean, I had assumed he'd been designated as Commissioner for Employment.
I had a bit of a problem with it.
But maybe I'm coming up with some additional words, and maybe you're going to be more happy about these. Vladis Dombrovskis, he's a Latvian candidate for the European Commission, and he's executive vice president for economy that works for people. That should sound good to you, Mark, I hope. But why am I saying this? I'm saying this because in the mission letter to Nicola Schmit, Ursula von der Leyen is saying, well, dear Nicola, you should report to Executive Vice President Dombrovskis. How does that work? I mean, within the Commission. Robert, do you have an idea? I don't.
It's not altogether clear, which is to say the Executive Vice Presidents have a broad coordinating role, but there's not really a very clear legal basis for this. This is more actually to do with political practice of trying to cluster certain areas of policy. I think when it gets down to this, a lot of it is down to the personalities of the individual commissioners. And certainly every commission we've seen to date, again, not unlike national governments, some commissioners are able to assert and affirm themselves. They have relatively strong personalities, relatively strong political bases. Others, that's less the case, but I suspect that's only very tangentially related in some cases to their formal status.
And I propose that we listen again to what is going on in Brussels now.
Safety net in a time when the state is perhaps in a very difficult position and struggling to guarantee that safety net.
Mr. Ferber?
Dann ganz konkret, wenn Sie sich die wirtschaftliche Situation der EU-Mitgliedstaaten der letzten Jahre oder des letzten Jahrzehnts anschauen, wo konkret würden Sie sagen, da wäre ein Fall gewesen, wo so eine Arbeitslosenrückversicherung gegriffen hätte? Welchen konkreten Fall?
Ja, also ich habe schon konkrete Fälle. Ich weiß nicht, ob das jetzt sehr fair ist, einen zu nennen. Aber wenn ich diese letzte Krise mir anschaue, dann sehe ich, dass in verschiedenen Ländern eigentlich die Ursache nicht war, dass sie übermäßig Haushaltsdefizite produzierten. Die sind eigentlich Opfer dieser Krise geworden, obwohl sie anfangs sehr stabile und sogar Überschüsse in ihren Haushalten hatten. Und Sie wissen, von welchen Ländern ich auch da rede, auch südliche Länder. Und diese Länder wurden natürlich voll getroffen von dieser Krise. Und die ersten Opfer dieser Krise waren die Jungen. Waren die jungen Menschen, die keine Arbeit gefunden haben, die arbeitslos wurden, das waren die ersten Opfer. Deshalb hat man diese Jugendgarantie geschaffen. Bitte?
Sorry, no follow-up question, no comments, no remarks at this point. Madam Nina Gill, also from Econ, your question, 1 minute.
Thank you, President. And Mr. Schmidt, you've outlined the role of social economy in tackling poverty and reducing inequality. I welcome the greater emphasis by the EU on the social economy because I believe it fosters alternative business models while addressing key social concerns. Could you clarify the potential of social economy in the sustainable transition and how you would combine this with the current challenges in investment for social needs? And I also would like very quickly to follow up on Marcus Ferber's point in terms of the European Unemployment Benefit Reinsurance Scheme. Could you actually maybe dwell a bit on how will you garner support from member states which have so far opposed it, and how will you ensure that this kind of counter-cyclical stabilisation function will support national unemployment schemes in times of stress and stimulate public investment without punitive conditionality for the member states? Thank you.
The first point on social economy, I think we have already a very active, all over Europe, a very active social economy, which is acting in our regions, in our territories, which is delivering important social services, especially very often to those who need it most, who guarantee care, childcare, care for the elderly. So this is a very important sector in our society. And so we have to strengthen this sector, not only because it delivers good social services, but it's also an active job creator. Because we have seen during the whole crisis that this is a sector where finally no jobs were destroyed. There were even jobs created in this sector without an unemployment reinsurance scheme. So we really have to promote that. About investment, I think this is an important point. The Parliament has allowed to write into the strategic investment program, the Juncker plan, the right also to give loans, to give credits to the social economy. This is a very important recognition of the economic and social role of social economy. And this means also that we have to focus a lot on social investments. If we have to have a competitive economy, we have also to have stable social conditions, which means social investment in education, in childcare, in health. This makes a good economy when you have a stable social environment. So investment in social services is very important. And then the new economy, I think there is a linkage between new economy, but there is also the sustainability where the social economy can be very active. New models for energy, for instance, or other issues. On the unemployment scheme, I think we have to work hard and persuade and take away the understandable reservations which we just have heard, that it's not a model just to finance or to encourage moral hazard, but it's again in the interest not of the country which benefits, but it's in the country in all in the interest of all the countries, and especially of a stable European monetary union.
Madam Jill, follow-up question.
Yeah, just to follow up on the issue of unemployment, you refer to the impact of digitalization and AI in the workplace. Now, it's estimated 50% of the jobs in EU will either change or disappear. There are 61 million people with low skills. What measures will you put into place as Commissioner to tackle the skills gap that exists, and also keeping in mind the greater gender parity that is necessary, especially in the tech sector?
Yes. I would not discuss the 50%, but certainly the impact of the digital economy or the digital transformation will be very strong and very heavy. What is not taken into account are the new jobs, but the new jobs can only be occupied if people have the right skills. So anyway, skilling, upskilling is the central issue for the forthcoming years. We have really to make sure that not only the young people have the right skills, they have the good education, but also those who are in a job now get the upskilling or reskilling to face the transformations of their jobs, or even the jobs which will disappear, and they have to take new jobs. So we have to invest more in upskilling and in reskilling. ESF Plus has to dedicate more money into skilling and upskilling. This is a central issue, and this has really to be integrated also in the country-specific recommendation, which has been done already in the near past. So I think investing more money in people, that's essential. We have a skills agenda, and I've been invited by the President-elect to revise, to revamp, to strengthen this skills agenda, and that will be focused on that.
Thank you
and
for
we are back
answering
in the
the follow-up question that actually
Européen
wasn't
in
a
Luxembourg City to discuss what has been raised in the last couple of minutes by a British MEP, among others, Mrs. Jill, who is a member of the Social Democrats. Why am I mentioning that she is British, that she's from the United Kingdom? Well, on my left-hand side, I heard Mark saying, "Oh, poor she, in 2 weeks time she'll be gone." But we'll see what happens there. But just to explain you, until the United Kingdom has not left the European Union, the UK members in the European Parliament have the same rights as all the others. The only difference that we have so far, and that we've had in also in the last recent years, is that they have no commissioner anymore in the college, and they have no commissioner designate. This as a parenthesis, and before I'll ask a broader question about what was discussed and what was raised by Nicola Schmit. Mark, the first question is. Nicola Schmit was talking about ESF Plus, so closing a skill gap. Can you explain what that is about? What is ESF Plus about?
Well, ESF Plus is this new social fund where they regrouped several other funds, and in order to have less bureaucracy and to have a more coherent way of giving money to the member states from this fund, it is now the ESF Plus fund, if I can resume it in an easy way. Upskilling and the skills gap, as Nicola Schmit said, there is 61 million people who work, who have an unemployment, but they have an unemployment where they don't really need skills. So we have to invest in having a more skilled labor force. And since there's a changing economy, they also have to upskill and reskill people. And then the lady who put the question, she talked, the British lady who put this very good question. She said that it's estimated that 50% of the existing jobs will no longer exist in 10 or 20 years in the nearest future. He said, I don't want to go into that, and he said something very interesting, because we should not not scare people. He said, yes, there will be jobs losing, but there will be new jobs being created. And for these new jobs, these are probably jobs linked to artificial intelligence. These are jobs linked to the le monde numérique, to the digital, and you need digital skills for them. And that's why, as I think he says, that this fund, this ISF Plus fund, needs to be used to that skilling and upskilling and reskilling is one of his priorities. If I understood him well, maybe you.
One more question about this answers, and there's one word we heard now quite a lot. It's a European Youth Guarantee.
Yes.
What is that about?
That's during the economic crisis, the young people, and he mentioned it. A lot of young people lost their jobs, or very qualified young people with university degrees could not find a job. And then this was an initiative which came from Social Democrat ministers of labor in the council, and in Austria they had it. It existed. It's a bit an Austrian model, and in some Nordic countries they had it. And I remember it was the Austrian Minister of Labor, and also Nicola Schmit was very much involved in it. And this was this program.
Who was the Luxembourgish Minister of Labor.
Yeah, this was this program that you have to give after 4 months an opportunity to a young person, either put him in an internship or offer him a new skilling, a new information, etc. And countries with budgetary problems, they got subsidies. We had to implement it in Luxembourg too, but we had to finance it from because it was calculated on the level of the, we had to pay it from our national budget. But I think it was a very good initiative, and the scandal at the end was that there was not enough budget for it in the financial framework.
Budget at the national level, or
on the European level. So those countries who didn't have enough budgetary means could not really implement it 100%, and this is why he said now we have to really make sure that this youth guarantee is properly financed, and there will be the new child guarantee which will be added to it, and which will function. The child guarantee will function. It's a bit of a similar model as the youth guarantee.
I have one additional question about that. I'm sorry if it may sound a bit naive, but you said that after this guarantee states that after 4 months, young people should be provided
a project.
Yeah. But let's say you are unemployed in Athens or in Madrid or in Rome. Does that mean that if you get a project on offer in Luxembourg, that's good enough, or is that really? Are you supposed to then, if you're unemployed in Rome, for example, that you are supposed to receive an offer in Rome, or are you supposed to travel for that?
You're supposed to have an offer in your country, because otherwise it will cost. It's within your country to also get experience. As you know, if you read the ads for when you look for a job, the thing is always they want experienced people, and that's the problem often from very highly people who come with good degrees, but they lack the professional experience. And this also helps. These internships helps them to get a certain experience. But it's not like an Erasmus program where you can choose. The youth guarantee will provide you, if you're from Stockholm, a job in Madrid, or vice versa. It's in your country where it's working.
Okay.
As far as I understood, but maybe.
Okay, thank you, and we'll get back to Robert after a few minutes after having listened to Nicolas Schmit a little bit more.
Oui, que l'Europe elle-même joue ce rôle, ça, je crois qu'il faudra être encore un peu patient.
Madame Lizzie, your question.
Grazie Presidente, parlerò in italiano. Onorevole Schmidt, con il mio intervento vorrei portare all'attenzione un paio di temi legati alle mobili frontiere.
Two issues relating to mobile borders, cross-border work when the social security coordination was overhauled is important, and then of course relocation to other EU member states. So on the first issue, last March, the text didn't obtain a qualified majority voting in the Council because of the opposition put forward by some countries, including Luxembourg. How are you going to reconcile defending the national interest of your own country with with a one-size-fits-all policy that the European Commission has followed when it comes to coordinating social security systems. Now, on the second topic, relocations within member states and worker mobility, as well as posting of workers, can lead to a very dangerous form of social dumping, as you mentioned yourself. Are you planning to introduce new industrial policies that will at least prevent or limit social dumping? Thank you.
Sur la première question du de majorité qualifiée.
Now, yes, on the first issue, it's true there was no QMV, but it wasn't Luxembourg that lay behind that. I can reassure you, madam, I am Commissioner.
Pas un luxembourgeois qui, par ailleurs, ambitionne de devenir commissaire européen. Donc, ce qui compte pour la Commission et pour chaque commissaire, c'est l'intérêt commun, l'intérêt européen. Donc, n'ayez aucune crainte à ce sujet. Donc, moi, j'espère qu'on va trouver, grâce notamment au Parlement européen, une bonne solution pour le 883, une solution équilibrée sur tous ces aspects importants qui permettent une mobilité équitable et une bonne protection de tous les salariés concernant par ces questions de sécurité sociale. Alors sur le dumping social, je crois que nous avons introduit toute une série maintenant de mesures. Cette commission, nous avons parlé de la directive sur le détachement. Il s'agit maintenant d'assurer la bonne mise en œuvre de ces directives. Il ne s'agit pas uniquement de créer chaque fois un nouvel instrument légal ou un nouvel instrument législatif. Ce qui est important, c'est de bien appliquer scrupuleusement, comme cela vient d'être dit dans la question précédente, scrupuleusement les règles que nous avons créées. Et s'il y a de nouvelles situations de dumping social, il faut alors réagir rapidement et mettre en œuvre de nouvelles mesures qui sont calibrées sur ces nouvelles situations. Mais je crois que nous avons maintenant un certain nombre d'outils qu'il faut bien mettre en œuvre et je répète, l'autorité européenne du travail est un nouvel instrument que nous devons faire vivre, nous devons faire agir efficacement.
Follow-up question.
Al dumping sociale e alla concorrenza sleale?
Dumping and unfair competition between countries, especially between Italy and neighboring countries. Now, we don't want a slippery slope where workers' rights are being reduced. And of course, we want to make sure that we have proper transitions as well. And we have the political project that Ursula von der Leyen mentioned. I'd like to know how you're planning to tailor wage policies within the EU member states, because there are huge imbalances. It's all about different labor costs. That is what leads to relocation and social dumping. And there's huge injustice, both when it comes to work and the labor market. Thank you very much in advance.
Je pense que vous avez déjà indiqué ce qu'il faut faire, parce que notre ambition, c'est d'activer, de renforcer la convergence sociale. Comme je l'ai dit, on ne peut pas construire une Europe, même une Europe compétitive, dynamique, innovatrice, sur une concurrence effrénée sur celui qui a les plus bas salaires. Ça, c'est pas un modèle qui va marcher, puisqu'il y aura toujours des régions dans le monde où les salaires seront plus bas. En revanche, quand nous discutons sur un cadre pour les salaires minimums, où effectivement on va essayer d'avoir aussi une certaine convergence salariale en Europe, convergence, ça ne veut pas dire identité. Convergence ne veut pas dire le salaire minimum en Bulgarie, en Roumanie ou je ne sais pas où, c'est le même qu'au Luxembourg ou en France. Mais une convergence, oui, nous devons travailler sur cette convergence et je crois que si on crée ce cadre sur le salaire minimum, ça va avoir un impact au-delà du salaire minimum, mais ça va avoir un impact sur tous les salaires et je crois que ça va aussi permettre de lutter contre le dumping social.
Madame Schidlo, your question?
Panie komisarzu, wśród powierzonych panu zadań znajduje się m.in. gwarancja na
Mark,
rzecz dzieci.
one question about what was being discussed here. Robert and I were looking at each other and had no idea what 883 is about. What kind of code is that?
Well, this was a question she asked Mr. Schmidt because he was before Labour Minister of Luxembourg. And there was a directive proposed by Madame Thyssen, who was the former social commissioner, and it has to deal with unemployment benefits. And it says that the country where the person lost the job has to pay the unemployment benefits. And Luxembourg, having 1/3 of its labor population coming from France, Germany, or Belgium, this would have a very big effect on the budget. But in Luxembourg, the problem wasn't so much the budget, but the problem was we just reformed the ADEME, which is the unemployment agency, and which is finally starting to really work. And the problem is our laws are that you can go to somebody's home if he's to make controls, but you cannot, as a Luxembourgish fonctionnaire, go to Germany or to Belgium or to France, because this is with sovereignty rights is not possible. So that was a bit the issue Luxembourg had with this. And then she asked how will he, since in the council there was a lot of good things in this directive, and Luxembourg didn't oppose the whole, but Luxembourg just said had a reserve, and they said we have to discuss this question because this has a big impact on Luxembourg, and we were even ready to accept it, but we wanted to have a delay to have an implementation delay. So this is what it is about. But she wanted to know, and he gave reassurance. She said, "Are you sure that you're not going to defend as a commissioner now the interests of your country?" And he quite clearly says, "I know that my mission here is to be a European, and not I'm not here to defend national interests, but I'm here to defend European interests."
That's a good point you're raising, and we'll talk about this institutional impact in a minute. But Robert, I want to ask you first of all: do you agree with what Mark said, or is Luxembourg just very good in protecting national interests now in this particular field, for example?
I would say both. Luxembourg is actually on selected dossiers very good in protecting national interests. But national interests in Luxembourg's case are very largely framed already in terms of European policy, in terms of a kind of belief in multilateral institutions. So yes, clearly there are specific interests that are defended. Taxation is perhaps the most obvious case, but cross-border unemployment benefits would be another. But the defense of the interest already tends to be framed in terms of a European framework, which of course, particularly for a relatively small country, makes it easier at the end of the day to ensure that those interests are protected.
So we see that we have a first question from the public. I'm really happy about that. Alex was your name, right? So let's pass on the microphone to Alex. My colleague Georgia has one. I'm sorry about that.
So my question has to do with a topic that has been mentioned but just once, and that is brain drain. But I have a feeling that it's been seriously not considered, because when we talk about upskilling, let's say we offer it to all European countries, right? And the youth of all European countries is upskilled now, so that they're better trained and everything. What they will do, because we are a mobile generation, is moving to where better opportunities are, which is terrible for countries in the periphery, including Italy. Myself, I'm moving here because I find better opportunities here. But if we do it on
you are Italian.
I'm Italian, yeah. If we do it on a daily basis, all Italians that study and are skilled move abroad, then countries in the periphery, they remain economically unable to develop. So they will slow down more and more and stay behind, regardless of how much money we put in upskilling, because that doesn't make the difference. The difference is made by improving the possibilities in the countries, not only the skills, but also the jobs, right? So my question is, actually there isn't a question because we didn't hear
That's
enough.
a remark, but okay,
Yeah.
but maybe Mark, you want to react to this remark?
Very good and tricky, good question. Well, first of all, he mentioned brain drain in the beginning. You remember when he made his first statement, he also mentioned it. But of course, during why did we have the brain drain? Why did we have at a certain time many Italians and Spanish people coming here and people from Poland? And that was during the economical crisis, and because it was not reacted, because we didn't have social policies, because Europe at that time, that was under the Barroso, had this totally liberal inspiration. People could not find jobs, and it was the young people who suffered the most, and that's what caused this brain drain. But I'm sure that every person who grows up, does his studies in his country, and if he finds a good opportunity at home, you want to stay with your family. I mean, it's good to travel and gather experience, but also, so I'm not so much worried about this. And this is why it's so important that he talked about this convergence, that we have to have less differences within the countries, between the countries, but also within the countries. In bigger countries, which are quite wealthy countries, you also have these problems of regions which are not economically strong enough, and therefore he insisted also on, when he talked about the territories and the local economy and the sustainability, he said this is the possibility to create new jobs in the regions, in the countries, and in everywhere. And I think this is maybe key to it. If I can put you a question back from your class when you graduated, I guess you did your bachelor in Italy and you're here for a master's. How many people from your bachelor left Italy?
Well, we were, it works. Yeah. We were 300 people, and that I know of, I would say 15% are abroad, and but they are interested. I'm studying international relations, so they're interested also in working for the European Union, for the United Nations. So we're particular, I would say. But I also met a lot of engineers, a lot of scientists that find better research opportunities abroad than in Italy, and that's my fear, that one day we will find ourselves without our own minds because we cannot offer them the money they deserve.
Yeah, that's also a problem for Europe at a whole, because a lot of researchers go to Silicon Valley, a lot of researchers go to Japan and to other places. So that's why this is not the subject of today, but also this whole research programs of Europe and Europe becoming a big player in the big economy and having these bigger companies. This is also an issue, and maybe we have to change some rules that it allows to have big companies in Europe too. So that's another discussion which we could dig into.
Alex, thank you for sharing that with us. Grazie. Robert, I want to get back to you on an institutional question that was raised here, where this Italian MEP asked Nicola Schmit, well, are you rather going to defend Luxembourgish interests in the European Commission? Let us know, I mean, how does a commission work? How does a college of this college of commissioners work? I mean, is for these commissioners, I mean, Nicola Schmit has been designated by the Luxembourgish government, and the same counts for all candidates. Are they more loyal towards the government at home, or towards the college or the commission itself? Which interests are the most important ones?
Okay, let me maybe back it up a bit, because we already had the question earlier on of why are there still British MEPs, but we don't have the designation of a new British commissioner. Now, in effect, part of around the discussion around the last Brexit extension was you could not legally constitute the Parliament without UK MEPs, which is to say, if the country is a member of the European Union, its citizens must be represented in the representative body, which is the European Parliament. On the other hand, there is no problem legally constituting the Commission, despite the fact that Boris doesn't want to name somebody, on the premise that absolutely over his dead body we're leaving on the 31st of October. That's because the Commission, and this comes back to the question, is not a representative body. The member states nominate someone to be a commissioner, but they are not a national representative. Nicola Schmit, in that sense, will not be the Luxembourg commissioner. And that's the point he actually made in his remarks. I'm a Luxembourger seeking office as a European commissioner. And in effect, when they assume office in the Commission, commissioners have to swear an oath of loyalty to the European Union, to the European institutions, that they will act as an official of the Union and not as a representative of their national government or of their member state. Okay, that's the formal legal situation, and it's clearly, on an occasion like this, what's going to be affirmed. What's the reality? Unsurprisingly, a bit more ambiguous, which is to say there is a clear legal obligation not to act as a national representative. Practice varies across individuals and countries. There are some countries that notoriously tend to see their commissioners more as national representatives.
Which ones?
Spain would be a leading candidate in that. There are others where there tends to be more of a sort of respect for the autonomy of the individual. But really where it goes to is, in some sense, the Commission has to be a European body, it has to function collegially. On the other hand, the fact that you, in effect, have one commissioner from every member state, because to the best of my knowledge, no one has ever designated a non-national, even though there's actually no legal bar to it, is they are meant nevertheless to be a kind of a voice and a conscience for their country. That where there are collegial deliberations, even if they're not there to represent, say, a specific government policy, they are there to say, well, there may be national sensitivities about this, or well, this may create particular problems in the case of my country. Of course, where this is particularly difficult, and this is where the question about cross-border unemployment benefits arises, if you are commissioner in a portfolio with a clear Commission policy that is contrary to your existing national policy. And of course, that's the question, in effect, that we just had.
And his former job.
And his, yeah.
He was in the council, like he was sitting on the other side, you know. Sorry.
That's okay. Let's listen to the next questions and answers, and let's see what's coming up there.
And who are very sensitive to this issue, but I will also talk to the European Parliament and to those here who are very sensitive to this issue. Several of you have already mentioned it. And I will go to these countries, including Sweden, but also some other countries, to really discuss with social partners and governments to make sure that you can absolutely preserve your system you are so much attached to.
Follow-up question?
Tusen tack för ditt svar, och det är klart att det här känns ju väldigt betryggande. Samtidigt som jag vet att man kan bli fartblind, man kan bli lite trigger.
But sometimes people get a bit trigger happy, and therefore for us who have this model based on a culture and tradition and history, something that we've come up with, a system that works and which guarantees a very high level of rights, it's important for us. And you're also talking about social dialogue, and you said that that social partners were welcome to participate. But how would you structure this dialogue so that the social partners can also be involved?
On this particular issue? Well, I think when we are talking about a framework or legal framework on minimum wages, I could not imagine not to talk to social partners. This is something which I really cannot imagine. And not only talking at the European level to social partners, but we also have to go to the social partners in the different member states, and especially to those who are very sensitive to this issue for the reasons you just elaborated on. And we have to talk to them and to make sure that what we want to establish is preserving absolutely the system. Because, well, it's not an issue. It's not the issue to transform or alterate or change or this system, which has worked well. So I really want to give you all the tranquility I can that that's not my intention and will never be.
Mr. Patton, your question?
Does the Commissioner agree with me that when it comes to jobs, the European Union is institutionally racist? Despite President von der Leyen's mission to you to promote full and productive employment and decent work for all, you've made no specific plans for the shocking situation facing many of the 50 million European citizens who come from an ethnic and racial minority. Research suggests that 1 in 4 of these European citizens are discriminated at work. In some member states, as many as 76% are not in employment, education or training, compared to 8% of the rest. Here in Belgium, the home of the EU, 1/3 of Belgians are educated to degree level, compared to 60% of Afro-Belgians. Yet those Afro-Belgians are likely to be 4 times more likely to be unemployed. Only 1% of staff directly employed by the EU has a minority background. The EU motto is united in diversity. Frankly, it should be united in diversity as long as you're white. Where better for the new Commissioner of Jobs to start than with Europe's worst transgressor, his own organisation, the institution of the EU itself? Why should Member States take any notice of the Commissioner or the President if they fail to get their own house in order? Or does the Commissioner agree with me that when it comes to jobs, the European Union is institutionally racist?
2 minutes for the answer.
I can be shorter. I think non-discrimination is a fundamental principle of the European Union. But I'm not naive. I'm not naive. I know that there are vulnerable populations who are suffering also on the job market. And really, we have not only have good principles, we have to give us the right instruments to implement these good principles everywhere, including in our own businesses, in our own institutions, wherever. I think this is something which also characterizes Europe. And we have to work hard on that. And I think what I've said on other vulnerable population applies also to people with different origins. And certainly I will fight and engage myself and commit myself to apply and to make sure that this principle of non-discrimination for any reason is really applied and enforced. And this is up to the member states, but it's also up to all companies. And many intelligent companies, they start understanding that diversity is a big asset. So let's encourage them and let's duplicate their good example.
And we are back here in the Salle Beige in Luxembourg City. Robert, is that true? Is the European Union from the inside not as diverse as it would like to be?
Well, the European Union institutions, I mean, if you look at something like the Commission, no, are not as diverse as the wider society, though that's really no more true, I suspect, than in the case of most national civil services. That in effect you are drawing from a certain pool of people who have certain qualifications, and there will be all sorts of forms of systemic disadvantage or systemic discrimination which will have played a role before that. Now, of course, some of you, I'm looking at some of my students who are looking at European careers. I mean, you'll know that they actually have changed the concours. They have actually changed the system of entry to get in the Commission. That it used to be, in a sense, much more culturally specific. That it used to be a test that was much more based on actual knowledge of European institutions, so that you would crucially know when the first free trade agreement between the European Union and Argentina or something was concluded, name the date. And the argument was, well, actually, that's unfair, because really there you are privileging people from a particular cultural and educational background. So the concours now is based much more on generic skills, on mathematical, logical reasoning, these sorts of things. The idea being that at least it creates a more equal entry point. Now, whether or not it does is an open question, because of course any system can be gamed and people have differential resources in order to tackle a system. But at least the idea is to move towards a more neutral and more open recruitment system into the institutions, which at least puts less emphasis on particular types of cultural or educational background.
Mark, I wanted to come back with you to the question asked by the Swedish MEP. I hope I'm pronouncing that right, Abir Al-Salani from the Renew Europe group, who was talking about Swedish specificities in this question of social dialogue. Can you explain us what she was talking about in particular here?
Well, I think this was also linked, this question, to the efforts of implementing a minimum wage. As you know, Nordic countries and also Sweden, being a Nordic countries, they have very high social standards. And if I'm well informed, Sweden doesn't have a minimum wage, but they don't need the minimum wage because they have very high collective bargaining. So, and she was afraid that this collective bargaining would then be diminished if there would be from the top there would be new instructions from Europe. And then he said no. He as he also said that social dialogue is very important, but he said we will go to the countries and we will look at the specificities of countries, and he gave her guarantees that she shouldn't worry about this, that this will not go and erase traditions or things which have grown naturally in member states, but it's more a general framework which he wants to set.
Before going back to Brussels, we have one question in the room. What's your name? Are you sure? Is the microphone really working? No. No. No, but we can't hear you on the street, and now it does. Yeah. So Martin, and you're also from the European Governance.
Hello.
Masters
I'm
Robert.
a student of Masters of European Governance, University of Luxembourg. I do have a question for both gentlemen, actually, regarding the minimum wage. So, to my knowledge, Mrs. Schmidt's portfolio is the only one that is somehow touching the social policy, the European Union. Like, there's no portfolio, any commissioner that would be tackling social policies. My question is, because that is something that really stayed at the national level, is that something, are we witnessing something revolutionary when Mr. Schmidt is talking about imposing some minimum wage?
Well, I think social policies, often people believe that social policies is only national policies, but there's a lot of examples. Social policies are European policies. The directive on work-life balance, for example, was a good example on social policy. The posted workers directive is social policy. So the European Union has also a lot of influence in social policies. And he also said raising awareness sometimes of a social problem is also already making social policies, and then helping the countries to find solutions to their social problems. But the minimum wage is something I think the Social Democrats had it in their electoral program for the elections, for the European elections. Other parties had it too, and I think it's as he said, not to create the same sum in all the countries, but to make equal level, to make it possible to live from that minimum compared to the living costs in that country. And I think this is the idea. The idea behind it is to avoid working poor. That's really the idea, because the phenomenon of working poor is a worrying phenomenon, and we have to really fight against this phenomenon of working poor. And then I think the idea of having like a frame minimum wage will be a good idea. And by the way, Madam von the President-elect put it in his mission letter. It is one of his priorities, where he has to come up with legislation on this minimum wage. And I think he wants to start working on it very hard and come up with results within the first 100 days.
Robert?
Yeah, I think we have to be careful about exactly what's being discussed. I mean, the idea here is not that the European Union will impose or set a minimum wage. In effect, what it will do is, if this legislation were to be adopted, create the obligation to have a minimum wage and establish benchmarks by which the national government would then be required to set it. So, I mean, it would not actually be a kind of direct imposition. It creates a legislative framework. That creates a series of problems or oppositions. Some of them are structural. Mark already alluded, in effect, to the Swedish case, where this is done by national level, peak level bargaining. Historically, in Germany, this was sectoral rather than national, so there are problems of that sort. But we also, I think, with the Swedish question, see that if you think about the European social model, there have always been two sets of resistances. There are the resistances we think of, or oppositions we think of most obviously, which are of the more neoliberal kind, that we actually want to use Europe essentially as an instrument of market creation without a countervailing social policy. But of course, there have also been oppositions from the other end, which have typically been that of the Nordic countries, which is, we don't want a European social model because it will reduce or diminish our existing national social model, that anything that's likely to be agreed at European level will be less than the existing national level of social protection. And the question then, and that was literally the question that was posed, is how do you then address that? So I think you have to bear in mind that there are these different discussions which are not just about kind of free market versus social Europe, but about existing sometimes higher levels of social protection, as well as simply an extraordinary diversity of national models of welfare states.
And we'll hand back to Brussels.
Can you outline any specific actions for developing a mental health policy for the workplace? Thank you.
Well, this is linked to an overall policy for people with disability. That's something, it's part of that. And we have to find schemes for these persons to work. Perhaps they can work, but they cannot work in any job, and they cannot work full-time. So there has to be a progressive integration of these persons into the world of work, into a job. The companies who are doing that have to be accompanied, have to be helped. So there is an overall strategy. I worked on that when I was a labor minister, together with the health minister and the minister for families and social affairs. So we're really putting into place also some guidance, some counseling for the enterprises, taking the risk, but also engaging, committing to some strong social, social commitment to take on board, to take some people with mental health. That's the first point. The second point is, yes, we have a sector which can better deal with this kind of people. That's the social economy. We have to promote jobs also which can be taken by people who perhaps have difficulties in other companies, but who could easily work in some different environment. So social economy is also, can be an answer to this issue.
Follow-up question. Digitalization often crashes with standard ways of organization and patterns of working, which may cause risk of burnouts for our European workers. You did mention that previously. Will one of your priorities be the renewal of the EU Compass for Action on Mental Health, which special focus on mental health-related diseases? Thank you, Commissioner-elect.
I think I have to deal with the commissioner who is in charge also of health policy, so we have to coordinate that. But certainly this is an issue which we have to follow up. We cannot just stop here and say, well, there is no follow-up. So I will certainly have a look at that, and together with the commissioner in charge of health, we will do so. I have already mentioned that social partners are engaged in discussing mental diseases at the workplace, like the ones you mentioned, like burnouts and stress. And I think we have to adapt a bit our knowledge, but also the ways how we can prevent. Because in many of these issues, when you have to start to cure, it's already very late. I wouldn't say it's too late, but it's already very late. What we have to have is a strong prevention policy. When people start to have a problem, you have to act, not when the problem is there, fully there. And so this prevention policy has to be integrated into our overall health and safety approach. Prevention is key.
Madam Scheibe, your questions?
If I may, we interrupt here on this question, since that is, or this topic, I think is very technical, and I want to discuss with you, Robert, a more general question right now, and it's been already mentioned I mean, since you teach, since your master's is called European Governance, explain us a little bit, how can a commissioner in charge of labor, employment, and social affairs really have a direct impact on what is happening on a national level? Or, I mean, are the things that we are debating here, I mean, are these not, you know, mainly issues that are solved on a national level?
It obviously varies from portfolio to portfolio, and as I hope at least our master students will be aware, I mean, what the literature tells us, and part of the dynamic here, is that negative integration in Europe tends to be easier than positive integration. Negative integration, by that I mean the removal of trade barriers and the creation of a single market. That tends to be easier than getting agreement on social policy, to get the kind of countervailing balance. And you're right that many of these issues remain significantly at the national level, and the question there is, on the one hand, to what extent can you move to have direct measures at the European level? We were talking about, perhaps, for example, a European minimum wage, or the framework for a European minimum wage. These are areas where there can be legislative movement. Of course, there are also a lot of areas in social employment policy which operate through so-called, and I hope my students will immediately recognize the term, soft governance, where in effect there are forms of peer learning, of sharing of policy, of the establishment of good practices and benchmarks without there necessarily being constraining legal obligations. So it tends to be a combination of the two. On the one hand, there are areas where you can move with direct legislation, particularly because of the sensitivities of these areas. There are others where you're more trying to incite and promote and create a kind of pan-European consensus without necessarily either having or wanting to use the instruments that you have to create legal obligations.
Let's talk about Nicolas Schmidt's portfolio in particular. Does he have now more leverage than he would have had like 10 or 15 years ago with this portfolio, or has that not changed?
I think it's a constant. I mean, it's essentially the treaty base, and it's then down partly to the individuals, partly to the overall political climate. That the overall political climate in Brussels and in the member states may be more or less representative, for example, in terms of the direction of moves towards more European social policy. And I must admit, I don't have a particularly clear reading of that at the moment. I don't think it's strongly pointing in one direction or the other, but perhaps you have a different view.
No, I partly agree with what you said, but I just think that the President Juncker started to put social policies a bit higher on the agenda again. And through the Göteborg summit, where the pillar of social rights was accepted, which is only paper, I must say, we agree on that. But in the mission letter of Mr. Schmidt, it says
we really distributed that.
Yeah,
what is this pillar of social rights about?
We have to implement it now, and I think this pillar of social rights gives impetus to social policies in Europe. And I think Mrs. von der Leyen, as he said in his initial speech, wants to continue on that, what we should call in French, sur cette lancée, to continue on that go. But the treaty is the treaty, and they cannot go beyond. So I agree with what you said.
But explain us again, this pillar on social rights, there are 20 points that are raised. Explain us a bit, you know, where did they come from, and did they have any impact yet? You said so far it just exists on paper.
Mm-hmm. Well, the pillar of social rights is like a declaration which was made with these 20 points. But before this didn't come top down. This was discussed very broadly with civil society, and there was a very broad consultation on the pillar of social rights. I remember that in my party in Luxembourg, we have a group which is called European Affairs, and we participated in that consultation, and we send in answers to the questions they put. So there was a very broad consultation where civil society of every member state could participate, where individuals can participate. You can go on the website of the Commission, and if they have a consultation, you can participate. So this was discussed quite during a long period, and then they agreed on this 20 points, I believe, on the social pillar of the pillar of social rights, and I think it's a good base, a good document, and it shows where Europe can be active in social affairs.
And let's see if right now in Brussels they're also discussing social affairs, since the MEP who just asked the question is Leila Kaibi from the far left GUE group. Let's see what Nicola Schmit is responding.
Un engagement clair qu'elle a pris. Et d'ailleurs, nous sommes tous convaincus, de la Californie jusqu'en Europe, qu'on ne peut pas regarder la nouvelle économie numérique seulement sous l'angle du marché, des firmes, de la compétitivité, mais que finalement, le capital le plus précieux dans l'économie numérique, ce ne sont pas les machines, ce sont les humains. Et donc construire une économie numérique où l'humain est au centre, c'est ça notre objectif. Et ça, vous pouvez être sûr que je défendrai et je trouverai, je suis persuadé, Madame Vestager à mes côtés, ce modèle économique qui d'ailleurs est en train de faire école un peu partout.
Mr. Brglas?
Za politično skupino socialistov in socialnih demokratov so ključni dostojni poslovanje.
Thank you. On behalf of the Social Democrats, we want to stress the importance of working conditions. This is why we support decent living income and social security number. All workers need access to social protection and, indeed, the right to engage in collective bargaining. That's not the case, sadly. You've talked a great deal about protecting workers on online digital platforms. How do you intend to protect their rights? How do you, which aspects do you think are the most important when it comes to choosing the right safeguards? And will you ensure that there's transparency when it comes to payments and posting of workers directives?
D'abord, la question de la protection sociale. Je crois que la question de la protection sociale est clé. Social protection is really key. And so the adoption of the recommendation on social protection really is an important step in that. And there is also a mechanism how we can implement, how member states have to implement this recommendation. And I think we have really to organize a good follow-up in the implementation of this recommendation. This is an important element that the implementation is absolutely efficient and equitable. So this is my first answer. The second, I have to come back to what I said on the Labour Authority. We have created an instrument, and now we have to use it. We have social partners on board, we have the Commission on board, and we have Member States on board. So we really have to make sure that this instrument becomes operational. And that's why I want it to become operational as soon as possible. So this is important for posting. This might be important also in the future for all kinds of other labor-related issues, including also safety issues, because very often posted workers are not those the best protected also in relation to safety and health. So this is also something we have really to look at. So implementation, it's not alone about legislation, it's about implementation. And here member states have a big responsibility, and we have to talk to member states. We have also take the good opportunity of the European semester, and a lot of recommendations are now in the area of social, so we have to use also the recommendation in the European semester to increase the awareness of member states to respect the rules and to have a good policies in all the issues you just mentioned.
Follow-up question?
Tudi moje dopolnilno vprašanje zadeva pravice delavcev in delovne pogoje. Da bi bili bolje pripravljeni ter se hitreje prilagodili na spremembe v multinacionalnih podjetjih, je bila
working conditions and labor rights. We need to adapt to changes. In 1994, a directive was adopted on workers' rights, employees' rights. Well, there are still many challenges that remain unresolved with regard to the directive. How do you intend to resolve the issue of sanctions and legal certainty, and as well as implementation in all the member states?
We are back here in Luxembourg, since this translation on this particular question is not fantastic, to be honest. I have a question to what was mentioned before, the European semester and a social dimension in the European semester. Robert, what is the European semester about, and how do you introduce a social dimension in the European semester?
European semester is about the regular annual budgetary reporting of the member states. And increasingly, there are now obligations at the European level in terms of national debts and deficits and this sort of thing. How you introduce a social dimension is a good question. I'm not sure at this stage that there is a comparably good answer, although all of this, of course, ties to what I was talking about earlier on, that there are various mechanisms to do with, for example, employment, where there are also reporting mechanisms, where there's also a kind of best practice mechanism. So it is about striking these difficult balances. And again, the mechanisms potentially can be used in that way, but it's not been systematically clear to date.
Mark?
Well, for example, that the Commissioner for Social Affairs is more involved also in the European semester, and also on the national level. When I remember during the Luxembourg presidency in 2015, they tried to bring certain ministers together when there was council of finance ministers, make them meet other ministers, labor ministers or social affairs ministers, so that people start not thinking only seeing the problems in their field, but also seeing the problems of other fields, and the social dimension is very much linked to this. So I think this is also a way of working together, where they can get this more social point of view into the European semester. When we talk about European economy and finance, there is always alarm if a country has too many debts. There is everybody panicking if the budget deficit is horrible, but nobody cares if the number of unemployed people suddenly rises up, or if the level of poverty in a country. And I think these factors have to be also taken in consideration, and then we could improve this whole procedure.
Robert?
Can I maybe add, I mean, in terms of understanding where this goes, there are different pull factors, partly at the level of the Council, of different member states having different agendas, as I already said, different structures of welfare states. But there are also pulls in different directions within the Commission itself, that different commissioners and different DGs can pursue quite different agendas. And certainly if you look at the academic literature, it's quite clearly demonstrated that there are quite different cultures in different DGs. That if you're working in the Employment Directorate as opposed to the Competition Directorate, you may well be pursuing quite different goals, which is why I always tell our students, I mean, when you look at the Commission, you shouldn't think it's a unitary actor. I mean, we always talk about the Commission position. Frequently, there are Commission positions, plural, across the different DGs. And it's also a kind of internal political battle.
Mark, before in your answer, you explained when we were talking about the European semester and the impact it has on national policy. I would like to talk about your institutional role that you have currently as a member of the Luxembourg Parliament. So just to recap, as I said in the introduction, Marc Angel is the President of the Commission for Foreign and European Affairs in the Chambre des Députés in the Luxembourgish Parliament. And I was wondering, what impact does European policy making have within the national policy making? What exchanges do exist? Do you have exchanges with MEPs, with commissioners, or is it just happening top down from the European institutions? Explain us a little bit on these institutional exchanges that there are.
Not at all. The national parliaments play an important role in European policies, especially since the Treaty of Lisbon. You know that every week we get a whole list of documents. All the proposals which come from Brussels are being sent to the national parliaments, but also to the national actors in civil societies, and they can make remarks works, and you know that we have the political control and the subsidiarity control to do. So our job as national parliamentarians is to inform our citizens, to do our job, to do this political control and the subsidiarity control.
So the subsidiarity control
is to see if a proposal which is made by the Commission, if countries or municipalities or regions could do it on a better way, to check if it's good that Europe does this, or if we could do it better. So that's the subsidiarity control, and you know, I want to educate I want that people, voters, if they meet a member of a national parliament, be it a Luxembourger, be it a Spanish MP, be it an Italian national MP, if that MP tells his voter, listen, this is Brussels, we had to do this, then
that's fake news.
Then the voter should ask this person, so what have you done? Ex ante, what have you done in your parliament when the proposal came? Have you done a motion, or have you fought? How do you interview your ministers when they go to the council? What questions? How did you interfere with the Commission? So we have a say in, and we're trying to also work better together with different parliaments. Every national parliament has a representative in the European Parliament. That's actually a lot of young people coming from universities have this job, and it's a nice community, these national representatives of the national parliaments in Brussels, in the European parliaments, and they see how we work together. And there is a platform called IPEX, Interparliamentary Exchange, and on this platform every national parliamentarian has access, and we can check where any piece of legislation, how it is being discussed in the different countries. I can click on it, and then I see, oh, this proposed directive in Austria, the parliament has made an avis motivé, I don't know how you say that, has sent a letter to the Commission and said they don't agree with it, and I can follow these works. And then there is a lot of interparliamentary exchange. There is institutionalized interparliamentary conferences like the COSAC, the Commission des organes spécialisés des affaires communautaires, Article 13 on budgetary questions, or on foreign security and policy, defense policy. So where countries, MEPs and national parliamentarians meet and discuss on this issue. And every committee in the European Parliament, from time to time, once or twice a year, invite national parliamentarians to come and discuss on a topic. And I think this is very important, that we as national parliamentarians, we have a local dimension, we have a national dimension, but we all have a European dimension. And this is why in the Luxembourg Parliament we don't have a special committee on European affairs. My committee deals with European affairs, but we send all the proposals to the different select committees, because it's so important that you don't have in a national parliament just an elite of one committee who deal with European affairs, but every member of parliament needs to have this European dimension, because almost over 60 or 70% of the legislation we do is transposing European directives, and we have to be involved in it from the beginning. So that's why I think the national parliaments have a quite important role to play. By the way, tonight I'm having a conference in this same room on
this
the
particular
role of
subject,
national,
so in case you're interested. I would propose let's listen to what is to Nicola's answers in Brussels.
Issues can be well tackled, sometimes better tackled, if we have a strong social economy sector. So certainly not every country knows exactly the same model of social economy. So we have to respect the different cultures. Same thing then with a collective buy. We have to respect the different models which exist in the different countries. But I think there is a lot room for action together. And in 2011, Commissioner Barnier and Commissioner, I think, Andor and also Tajani, they had a social business conference, which really created a positive dynamic for social economy in Europe. So my idea would be, with other commissioners, again, it's not only the Commissioner for Jobs who can be responsible and who can tackle this issue, with other commissioners, to really replicate such initiative, to bring actors together and to have a plan to promote social economy in relation to the big challenges we have in our societies, and to use the tool of social economy, to give social economy. I've mentioned about the financial aspect, to promote the financial aspect. The jobs issue is very clear. So I think there is potential. We have to use it. The internal market is an important issue. Social economy should have the same rights on the internal market than any other enterprise. So I'm looking forward to work on that with other commissioners to make social economy even more solidly established in Europe and part of our social market economy. And that's also linked to social responsibility, which was mentioned by our colleague.
Follow-up question?
It's very difficult to get concrete answers. But I think it's important we need to move towards a homogenized framework that's the same everywhere. Now, one of the challenges we'll face in this Parliament, and I think you've shared some very interesting ideas that we can share in Renew Europe. I think the problem of youth unemployment, of course, in certain member states, the levels are just unacceptable. They're intolerable. And there, my question would be, do you feel that when there should be a reserved share out of funds, the 3% for youth unemployment, and do you think that the member states that are most badly affected have a 15% share allocated to them? Because I think it's a scourge that really affects us all, and it's now that we need the concrete measures to tackle that problem.
Just a brief response. You know, if we start, if we want to really harmonize exactly the status of what we call social economy, which has a very different name in Germany, for instance. When you talk about social economy in Germany, they do not understand what you mean. But they have also a very strong social economy sector. If we want to harmonize this, we will end up nowhere. But we can have a very practical, pragmatic approach on that. And mobilizing and creating some level playing field for all kinds of enterprises, associations, and so on, who consider themselves belonging to the social sector. That's just a compliment to your question. The second one is very important. That's youth unemployment. I think this is absolutely also remains absolutely a priority on our agenda. I won't give you now a clear answer if it should 3% or 15%. First, you have to know exactly what can we do better, what can we do more, how can we use the existing tools we have. We have talked a lot about youth guarantee, but it's not only youth guarantee, it's education, it's training. All this have to come together. And certainly, the funds we have to dedicate to youth unemployment, we have specially to dedicate them there where youth unemployment remains a major problem. There where youth unemployment is very low, where they can tackle their problem more easily. But it's where the concentration of youth unemployment is high. There we have also to focus our resources.
Last question of today, Mr. Hetman.
Already.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
You have talked at length about posting of workers, but I'd like to turn your attention to one issue and ask a very simple and short question. The directives oblige the member states to publish all information on the conditions of posting and remuneration of workers on one website. However, unfortunately, the practice shows that these websites often lack some information. What steps are you going to take to make sure that these websites really reflect the actual legal situation in the countries that receive posted workers? Thank you.
It's again the question of implementation. It's not enough to have good rules, to have good regulations. You have to make sure that what you have decided is also implemented. Now, I must say, I admit that I didn't know that. So I will certainly check if this is the case, if the information is not available, if the websites are not complete, if the information which has to be given, which has to be delivered, is not given. And if this is the case, well, we have to act. We have to make sure that those who are posting workers also give the right information. You know, posting is a positive thing. It's very often presented now as the worst imaginable thing. But it has to respect the rules, it has to be fair. It has to be fair to the posted country, to the posting country, but also to the workers. Not only those who are posted, but also those who are directly impacted by posting. And therefore, to make it fair, you have at least to have all the information on the conditions. And if this is the case, that all the information on this internet is not given, well, the Commission will certainly do something about it and enter into discussion that will be the case. But I have to check that. I must admit that I was not aware of that, but I'm not yet in the job, so give me a chance.
Well, I hope you'll forgive me if we're going to miss the last follow-up question, but we're coming back. We will be heading back to Brussels for the closing remarks of Nicolas Schmit. He will have 5 minutes for that. Just a quick question, Robert. What is a posted worker? Was it? You said you promised you can explain it in two sentences. There you go.
I will try in 2 sentences. Basically, in one initial sentence, a posted worker is a worker employed in one member state under the salary terms and conditions of that member state, and then posted to, transferred to, on, strictly speaking, a temporary basis, another member state. So hypothetically, this could be, say, a Latvian or Estonian construction firm which hires people in Latvia or Estonia, but then is contracted to do work in, let's say, Sweden, and posts those workers to Sweden in order to accomplish a specific project. The difficulty with that, and why it's controversial, is that obviously it potentially undercuts the local labor market. Because if you have these workers who are hired in Estonia or Latvia, to take those examples, under local salaries and conditions, those will clearly be lower salaries and will not be identical conditions had those construction workers been hired in Sweden. So this is an issue for many trade unions because they see it as undercutting the local labor market.
And that's still, I mean, there's no legislation against that? I think there is, no?
There is legislation which now limits this in various ways. Because, of course, part of this is about having a labor market, about free movement, so there are various limitations. I mean, the intention was obviously that it allows workers to go on short employment placements in the context of their existing employment. It had, however, been systematically distorted or abused for reasons of essentially undercutting the market. There has now been some regulation of that, although I would argue still imperfect regulation of that.
We have a question in the public that we will take after the closing remarks from Nicolas Schmit that we are going to listen to now.
A system which makes posting beneficial to everybody and especially acceptable to everybody. Because if we do not have rules, well, there is a very strong rejection. And we consider posting as part of the free service, providing services and free circulation. So we have to make sure that it is working properly and fairly. That we will do, and also on the level of administrative procedures. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The last 30 seconds you got as a bonus, Mr. Schmidt. Didn't use my hammer. Thank you to all of you for your questions. Thank you very much for your answers. And now you will also have the chance to make a final statement for no longer than 5 minutes.
So you think, and after, well, so first I want to thank you for this very interesting, instructive, stimulating, critical discussion we had. I must say this is European democracy. And I think our member states, as we come from our member states, we had responsibilities in our member states. Well, I do not know many member states where such an exercise takes place. And we should really be proud of this democratic system. And I really congratulate our parliament, because I'm still a member of our parliament. I really congratulate our parliament for having introduced this debate, this exchange, because the job of a commissioner should be very strongly, very directly related to the work in your parliament. We are not those very far, even if it's very close, away from what happens here. I often hear, well, these commissioners, they are not elected, they are not. Well, I became a minister without being elected in my member state. Now I have been elected to our parliament, and I have been, or I will be judged by you, which doesn't happen in many, I think in no member state. So thank you very much for this very stimulating exercise. I liked a lot, and I cannot say that I suffered, but it was tough, and it has to be tough. Now, it's not because we had a good debate today that we should not have very frequently this kind of debates. And I will come back whenever you ask for, whenever I have the feeling to talk to you, to take your advice, to take your opinion, very diverse, very different, sometimes quite critical, I must say, but I think this is what makes our European politics lively and really democratic. So I take the commitment today to be often with you and to continue what we started today, if you allow me. Now, I think we have a common project, a big common project. Everywhere, everybody along his own ideas and ideals. We are not the same, otherwise there would be just one party here, which we do not like by no way. But what we have in common is to serve our people. It's to serve European citizens. It's to bring Europe again closer to the citizen. And our citizens, they have their daily life. They have their daily problems. And we have to deal with their daily problems. And many of the questions you asked me about minimum wage, about social protection, about poverty, about children, all that is part of the daily life of our citizens. So we have to make sure that our policies serve our citizens in their daily life. That after 5 years of this Commission, Europeans can say, well, there has been some real positive progress. There has been some important changes in my life thanks to Europe. That's the big promise of Europe. It's not just about peace, though peace remains a big and very important issue. But this shared prosperity, this idea that everybody has a right to be part, an equal right to be part of society, and to have equal opportunities, that's what makes Europe great. And I think we have to defend these values. Not just by words, I agree. We have to defend it day after day in our political action. And that's what we have to do together, the Commission, the Member States and the Council certainly, but together with Parliament, because you are the voice of our citizens, and we have to listen to this voice. Thank you.
These were the closing remarks of Nicola Schmit, and we are also then heading to the closing remarks.
Thank you very much.
In Luxembourg, and to the final
comment on
we are receiving from you. I'm interested to know what your impressions are on the performance of Nicola Schmit, and especially now on this closing remarks. Robert, Nicola Schmit was applauding this procedure. He says, "This is European democracy. We can be proud of this democratic system." Do you agree?
Well, I mean, in this context, he really couldn't say anything else, I think it's fair to say. No, I mean, I think it actually is a very good process. As you'll know, it's developed over the years, was originally actually modeled on an American process. I mean, this is actually modeled originally on the advice and consent procedure in the American Senate, by which members of the cabinet, members of the executive, perhaps most famously or infamously, Supreme Court judges, have to be confirmed by the Senate. Strictly speaking, this is not a confirmation. Strictly speaking, this is an evaluation of the candidate, which legally could be ignored, although politically it will not be. In terms of his performance, I mean, just to judge what we've seen today, I mean, we were talking earlier on, it is a bit like the French Grand Oral, and there are certain boxes you have to check. Part of this is about demonstrating a European vocation. Part of this is about demonstrating competence, having done your homework, and there have been some spectacular failures in the past of individual candidates who clearly had not done their homework, had absolutely no knowledge of the portfolio they've been named to. It's partly about giving gauges to the European Parliament, about demonstrating that you're willing as a future commissioner to cooperate with the Parliament, that you're sensitive to its concerns and role, and we saw that very strongly. I mean, this is part of the performance. If you think back to Nicolas Schmidt's opening remarks, I think in all three languages he made a remark about cooperating with the Parliament, and then of course he returned at the end to saying about how much he valued our Parliament and underlining that in order to identify himself with the institution. It's also about, you know, putting down certain markers, and we saw that in some of the questions as regards specific policies. I mean, overall, I mean, it's clearly a very good performance in a context where there wasn't really any doubt. This is not one of the more sensitive nominations or one that anybody expected to be contested. We're going to have, I think, a couple of those in the coming days. Certainly if I were, for example, Sylvie Goulard, if I were a liberal with some vulnerability, given that we've already had a social democrat and a conservative knocked out, I'd be a bit worried. But this is one where I don't think there's any reason for concern.
Just as a parenthesis, yeah. What are the risks Sylvie Goulard might run?
Well,
explain us a bit.
No, I mean, there are a number of issues concerning the employment of parliamentary assistants, which have been brought up already in the conflict of interest hearings, but also that there is a bit of political game playing here, which is to say, typically in the past, if the parliament has skewered somebody of one party, the other party will then skewer somebody from the other party. Given that, in effect, we've already lost an EPP, or more or less an EPP candidate, and a social democratic candidate, there is a suspicion that a liberal is going to get knocked out as well, and it wouldn't surprise me. Also, if I can, I think there are any number of people in the European Parliament, because this was Emmanuel Macron's nominee, who would love to have a dig at Emmanuel Macron, who undermined their Spitzenkandidat process.
Marc, I suspect that you are very satisfied with Nicolas' performance. Did he do his homework as Robert just explained it?
Yes, I think he did his homework. I'm very satisfied, but I'm also very impressed, and I'm very proud also. But I'm not surprised, because I know him, and I've seen him as a minister in the Luxembourg Parliament, how he was debating with us. So he's very at ease in the dialogue with parliamentarians, and as he said, he will do that in the European Parliament too. And in his final remarks, he reminded that he is one of them, and I think this is important too. Often was discussed about the quota of how many women and men would be in the Commission, but there was this secret quota which was never talked about, that the Parliament is very keen on having commissioners who had been elected during European elections and who've been coming out of the European Parliament, and Nicola Schmit is one of these candidates. As he said, I stood for elections, I stood for European elections, and I'm a member of this House, and I promised to come back. So I think this was also very strong. Of course, in his initial speech, he also performed. He showed that he has language skills, which is also an asset in European affairs, because you can communicate, you can have direct discussions with partners and I think French, English, and German are major languages. I don't want to say other languages are not important. All languages is important, but it's important to be able to communicate well. And he had the advantage, we must admit, that he was Minister of Labour Affairs for many years, and he had presidencies, 2 Luxembourg presidencies, where he was the member of government who went to the European Parliament and had to answer to the MEPs on all subjects. That was in 2005 and back in 2015. So he has also a certain experience. And we must not forget, he was a diplomat, he was ambassador in Brussels in the permanent representation of Luxembourg, where he was involved in a lot of negotiations. So he has a very firm European background, and I think you could feel this. And I was impressed that there was no personal questions on finances or things like that, because he was already cleared by the other committee who analyzed the dossiers. So there was no such questions, which is important too. So I'm very impressed and also very proud of Nicola Schmit, whom I fought elections here in Luxembourg. He was our Spitzenkandidat together with Lisa Kersch, and I'm very proud to take his seat in the European Parliament. And I'm looking forward to, I'm getting excited now. Now that I see that, I really get excited.
Yeah, Mark, and you were talking about important assets that you have, that Nicola Schmit has, and if I may say, I think you have one important asset or qualification if you are most probably becoming a member of the European Parliament with your experience as the president of the Commission for European and Foreign Affairs in the Luxembourg Chambre des Députés, Luxembourgish Parliament. On behalf of the House de la Maison de l'Union Européenne, fingers crossed for the Luxembourgish candidate, for Nicola Schmit, and then we wish you all the best for your work that is most probably going to be in the European Parliament from November onwards. So if the European Commission will be approved, it will be for November 1st, and then in November, Marc Angel will succeed, most probably succeed Nicola Schmit to the European Parliament. So good luck to you, Marc. Thank you for being with us. Thank you, Robert, for being... thank you, Robert, for being among us, for this very valuable explanations you've given us. Thank you for bringing along your students. I hope it wasn't too much, too horrible, to spend these 3 hours with us. We had breakfast, and now we have some sandwiches to make up for it. And so thank you for the students, and Robert for the participation of the University of Luxembourg. A big thank you also to the pupils, for whom I think it was even a bigger effort to have these 3 hours of concentration here. So that is pupils of the Viertje. Vielmals merci, dass kommen seid. Auch vielmals merci und Schüler aus dem Lönster Lycée. Vielmals merci und Profen, die nicht konnten heißen aus dem Viertje. Merci auch und Profen vom Lönster Lycée, die heißen unter anderem unter der Koordination von der Madame Ponchon. Vielmals merci dafür. And thank you for those who watched our event op rtl.lu, wort.lu, op our Facebook site. And stay tuned for the other events we'll have in the future, and we wish you a wonderful day. Thanks.
And thank you to Jonathan Ponchon for being a great moderator, and to all the staff of the Europa House here. Thank you.
Yes.